Welcome back, everybody, to StarSeries Season 2 Finals. It's Friday and Noxious, and we're bringing you guys the winners Group A match. That is Xixo versus StanCifka. The winner goes to day number 3 with the first seed in their group.
Right.
And we'll find out who is going to take it. Now, this is the winners match, meaning that the loser is not out of the tournament. They just drop to the final match of the day. But everyone wants to kind of get out early. I mean,
Yeah, that way you can just keep watching other players
Yep.
play, maybe get a better idea of what their lineup is. Now, StanCifka and Xixo have this kind of rivalry as a result of us betting on whoever would win on this. Now, I think Xixo overall showed that his lineup was very solid, just with the clear, almost sweep he had on his opponent's Xixo, whereas StanCifka seems to be playing a more slow style, as usual.
Per
Yeah.
usual, like you mentioned, Cifka is a control player, a bona fide defensive control style player. That's what he really likes to do. He's, I believe, the only person to bring Rogue in the entire tournament. That's really fascinating to me, considering that Rogue is a class that people always feel like is underrated. But it also doesn't surprise me because there's not too many Rogue loyalists at this tournament. You know, we don't have the usual suspects of people who always live and die by the Rogue.
Like Dog.
Yeah,
instance,
Dog's a
or
guy who
even
loves it. Or
Oskaka.
Oskaka, just saying. Like, these players all
Yeah.
love Rogue, for better or for worse. One thing that is here iconic to Stan Cifka, though, is that I don't think, like Life Coach, I don't think I've ever seen Cifka play a Zoo Warlock before.
I don't think there's any reason for that specifically. It's just that it's the type of deck where you can make a game plan that happens very early, based on the hand you have, and there's a huge selection of them. Your game plan will be fleshed out in like many directions, so there's a lot more decisions. Like the tree of decisions, I think for those decks is a lot bigger, and as a result, they feel more comfortable there. I think coming from a Magic the Gathering background, it just shows in the types of deck that he likes to play.
It's funny because I asked Life Coach this, I think, a month ago at the Xfinity Invitational, and I was asking him, like, have you ever played a game of Zoo? And Life Coach paused for 2 seconds and said, no. He's never actually played a game of
Yeah,
Zoo.
I'm almost not surprised.
Yeah, he says he saw what Zoo, because, you know, for him, he watched Hearthstone before he started playing. That's how he got into it. He saw it on Twitch. And he started playing it, and he lost a lot against Zoo, so he got mad. He's like, well, I will never play Zoo. And so then he started playing.
What have you done?
Yeah, so he started playing Handlock, and he fell in love with it. It was one of the first decks he played, and the rest is history. Let's talk about our first player of the series. It's Xixo. Xixo's 24 years old. He's grown up right before my very eyes. I remember meeting Xixo when he just turned 21. And
At the beginning of Hearthstone?
yeah, it's kind of the beginning of Hearthstone. It's been a while. You know, Xixo was one of the first people who even taught me a lot about competitive Hearthstone at its core. He was first known by playing a lot of Control Warrior. That was his claim to fame. That's how he actually
That's interesting because usually I think that is associated with other players in the earlier days. When I think earlier Control Warrior, I expect Kit Kats, but
I'm about to
Xixo
blow
was
your
up
mind.
there. Go ahead.
Xixo was like the guy putting Mad Bomber into his Control Warrior deck. And I remember him telling me that it was much better than Wild Pyromancer. And I was like, dude, I don't know. Because Wild Pyromancer was also in Control Warrior
back then. Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know about that. But he tried to convince me. And then he won a tournament, at our local tournament, with that deck. And
it kills Blood Imps, right?
Yeah, I guess. I don't
That's what it did back then.
I can't remember the justification. I want to say that it was like he would play like Acolyte or something like that, and then he would like kill his opponent's board with that, plus hit his own thing. It was silly, but like in the end,
it's kind of like Ravaging Ghoul nowadays. That's kind of what he was aiming for.
Or it's kind of like Wild Pyromancer.
Sure.
Yeah. Xixo, that was his claim to fame, and then he started, of course, laddering a lot more and branching off and making a lot of Zulocks hit #1 legend.
Yeah, Xixo, I think he's got some of the most times getting legend first on multiple servers at once. Of all the players that I've seen, at least, grind on ladder, that's one of the big things that kept him alive.
It feels like it is scaled back because I think Xixo's realized that staying up 30 hours consecutively is really poor for your health, I think.
And your mental health.
He's dialed it back. Not just for physical health.
Yeah.
Just, you know,
just can't do it.
He was having a little bit of trouble with some sleep cycles and stuff. So thankfully, he's kind of dialed it back. And as a result, started like started having a lot better results, I think. Overall.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting too about Xixo is I feel like ever since Aggro Shaman cropped up before the expansion, the Old Gods, it's one of the decks that he's been playing the most of. I remember when he started including Elemental Destruction in the lists before the expansion hit, and he still to this day plays Shaman the most, I think, of all the players I see.
I think, I mean, it's really hard to say what deck or what class Xixo is known for the most. I think people attribute a lot to him for popularizing different things. Like he was taking like Sea Giant Zoo Warlock.
Sure.
He was also like the one putting Secret Paladin on the map, but not for the right reasons. He was actually losing a lot.
Losing with it, yeah. Initially, at first, I remember like the initial list. People were like, "Well, this deck is filled with one-cost secrets. That can't be."
People
good.
made fun of Xixo for playing Secret Paladin, but then a month later, everyone's playing Secret Paladin.
Yeah.
So there it is. Cifka, on the other hand, his signature class hasn't changed anything. It's Warlock, ranked number 9 in Europe, according to Ghosty Gamers, and of course, Cifka has his own quirks and Cifka-isms. He takes his shoes off. He usually has a few bottles of water and a bowl of fruit, but he already just went all out on the fruit downstairs.
Yeah, saw him downstairs trying to eat between the matches, which is typical of him. I mean, one of the things that I like about Cifka, though, is how down-to-earth he is. Whenever you ask him about what he thinks about a specific matchup or what he thinks about a player, it's always full of uncertainty. I don't know. I don't know is kind of his word. At this point, he values every single deck almost equally. When you ask him how he feels, he's like, anything can happen. You play your best. You try to keep track of your cards. He's very analytical about it, knows that the uncertainty is something you have to accept.
I think his composure is, his strength to a large degree. You look at, like, Cifka, he also handles the random outcomes of Hearthstone a lot better than other players.
Exactly, as a result of that.
He's not exactly, he doesn't succumb to tilt nearly as much as his opponent sitting across from him does.
I don't think I've ever seen him tilted.
Cifka, I think I have seen him one time upset.
During a game, when you watch the camera and he just kind of gets into the intensity of, like, life coach style?
It's when someone's doing construction right next to him while he's trying to play a game of Hearthstone.
I don't know what you're talking about, Frodan.
Someone's drilling a hole
in this wall,
right under me and Noxious. I'm pretty sure we're just gonna fall through, or even maybe the opposite, where they're drilling above us.
I don't exactly know what it is, but it's right there.
Firebat falls down like straight on our laps.
I don't know what's happening. All I know is that could tilt me a little bit as well.
No, I saw Cifka one time upset because I think last year he tried to qualify for Hearthstone World Championship, and there's some point mishap. With like the final bits where I think he was like tied or off by 1. As a result, he got out of the top 48. It was really unfortunate.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, such is life. I think Blizzard's really learned a lot of lessons. I think he learned a lot of lessons as well. Don't wait till the last day to ladder. And I mean, that's pretty much brought us to where we are right now. Cifka's actually had a pretty good 2015. He was one of the breakout players.
I think so
people
too.
Are looking out. People looked at Life Coach-ish. I mean, Life Coach still had 2014 stuff, but 2015 is really the year of Cifka, the year of Osaka, the year of Purple. I think those are the 3 players that you look at the most who had the best performances for that year, being like rookies.
Specifically, yeah, exactly. Moving from the their players that we know the name of to they have tournament results to show for it. And I mean, one of the things that I like about Cifka too is the fact that despite that, you haven't seen him really join a team yet, and he puts in, I think, the most hours of any person I've seen in the Hearthstone scene as far as practicing for his decks and learning them inside and out.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I hear about the legendary work ethic of Cifka, but there's a lot of other people who also work hard. I mean, even Firebat is still to this day playing a ton of Hearthstone. For better or for worse, he was telling me like that he's played like 12 or 14 hours a day for the past like week and a half.
They've been with Purple, I think, right?
Yeah,
I don't know if he's still in the live-in with Purple, with him practicing a ton together, but
Cifka's up degenerate habit. Like they start playing a lot, and they start tilting, so the other person starts helping them. And I don't know if they're truly playing, or maybe they're just like playing / watching the other guy next to them play.
I think it's a mix of both, honestly. Like when I see them talk about deck building, usually they're both contributing to the same deck idea. One of the big things they're doing nowadays, at least they did recently, was Ancestral Shaman. That was fun.
For sure. So Xixo bans Cifka's Warlock, and Cifka bans the Shaman. Now, I know that a lot of people ban Warlock because they're really afraid of Zoo, and They're really afraid of stuff. But is Reno Warlock that fearsome, you think, Noxious, that you want to take it away? Because it's Cifka, so you know that he's playing Reno.
Right, it's Reno Lock. I think one of the big things is really the fact that you've got the Warrior in your lineup, and if that doesn't get banned, then suddenly the Reno Lock can kind of farm it for a win. If it comes down to it, I don't think the Warrior from Xixo is especially good against the entire lineup from Cifka.
All right. Well, let's go into game number 1. We have Rogue versus the Druid. Now, this matchup has evolved a lot, partially because Yogg Druid is continuing to evolve. I think, the cards like a Nixie are really coming into the mix of stuff. That's an interesting dynamic. But overall, I still think the key stays the same with like Rogue trying to just seize back the board from the Druid somewhere in the midpoint of the game, and if it can leverage things like Violet Teacher or even in best cases Gadget and Auctioneer,
Sure.
it's actually in a pretty decent spot. So I would still say this matchup is relatively even.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Rogue deck that Cifka's got is he's also playing 2 Farseers with their Shadow Step on top of it, and these cards can be a little bit clunky. He's only playing 1 Sap, so that's a lot worse against Druids when they start ramping out really quickly. And speaking of that, looks like Xixo is going to open up with a 4-drop right into this, knowing there's only possibly 1 Sap in the list, and with double Raven Idol on the back of this.
That's really unfortunate for Cifka to deal with right now on this early on. And Xixo has a lot of opportunities to follow up, not just double Raven Idol, but even the Wrath. Say if his opponent drops something immediately on turn 2.
Yeah, it's not that likely in Rogue, but it'll happen occasionally when you have like a turn 3 play with a 3/3. You always have the Wrath on the backup. I feel like Cifka right now is going to have to commit to a Deadly Poison play with Eviscerate to deal with this on turn 3. But by that point, 1/1s come out, and suddenly it's no longer very viable. Do you ever attack the Teacher here to put it on 4 so your Deadly doesn't get consumed when you need to kill it?
I mean, it kind of gets consumed anyways because you have the charge only at 1 for the daggers, so it feels like slightly redundant to just take additional damage for no reason. So I don't blame Cifka for that.
Yeah, I think it's also maybe opening up Backstab as a potential out, because you can always use Backstab SI plus the hit. Well, sure, let's...
Well, you have another Raven Idol, so I don't think the second one is necessary here.
Soul of Force is interesting, for sure.
Yeah, Soul of Force is very interesting. Oh, he does take it. Okay, I was thinking about taking just Living Roots and just creating a bunch of 1/1s. I think maybe he thinks Fan of Knives would be too punishing then.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, that's a really interesting hand for Xixo, because all of a sudden, the burst potential would be nuts.
Okay, so what Xixo does by taking Force of Nature, he values the board presence. Savage felt like too situational, I guess. Like his situation would have to be that he had a big board and he'd be able to Savage Roar. And I think if you're going to skip on cards like Living Roots to build the board, then you're going to pass on cards like Savage Roar. And it makes a lot of sense too, because Xixo probably understands like, I'm not going to like burst Rogue out of nowhere. I don't have Force Nature Savage Roar.
Yeah, I mean, I might, but I have to assume that he never runs Fan of Knives or use prep on anything that deals any damage in AoE against my board. So.
Well, look, if Cifka had
Fan of Knives,
he would actually be able to seize back the board immediately and punish the play. But he doesn't.
All right, so here's an interesting, like the prep draw here for StanCifka opens up the opportunity of clearing up most of the board, which puts him back in the driver's seat. But again, like he needs to try to get turn 4 clear just to get the like his Tomb Pillager on.
I mean, I like playing on SI this turn though a lot, and just clearing as much as he can. And this is something that Xixo is kind of cognizantly aware of. The only problem is that he doesn't have like the cleanest of turn 3 plays. All he can do really is Wrath and Raven Idol at the moment.
I think that's why there was also the pickup on the Force of Nature, is knowing full well if something happens to this board, I'm going to need to transition into something a little bit more consistent. And that gives him at least a minion-based play to make on 5.
Well, 5 is still 2 turns away, too. That's something to consider. Like, Xixo doesn't have something directly to play on turn 4. He has a Raven Idol for the next turn if he wants the Living Roots on top of this Wrath.
So if you didn't see Fan of Knives this turn, do you expect it simply not to be there? Because there would have been the possibility of Fan of Knives prep Avis for the full clear.
Yeah, you probably would have not seen it.
Right.
Like, after seeing the play. Like, Xixo can still anticipate Xifka having Fan. based off that that line.
All right.
But Cifka's ahead on the board, and that's huge for Rogue at this point.
Yeah, the Wrath was used for card draw there for Xixo, so the possibility of ever finding a way to kill a 5/4 pretty slim. It can always be found out of the top. Like you pick up a second living root, you can double hit this one. You can try. Well, there it is.
Yeah,
that's
savagery and healing touch. Let me tell you, aren't exactly the most desirable.
Oh well.
Yeah, and you gotta snipe this this Tomb Pillager. It feels really bad to commit that. Like you committed essentially 2 cards and a lot of mana in order to deal with it. Your opponent gets a coin, but in the optimistic case, your opponent doesn't have a minion to play. I mean, Cifka did draw that Azure Drake off the top, but man, if he didn't have that and he drew another spell instead, he'd be
in a world of hurt. Yeah, I mean, Gaddison Auctioneer was
position.
almost the best. Because 1 turn later, he can suddenly start cycling, sets up a dagger. The Drake is a decent middle ground, at least.
Yeah, it's one of the better draws in his deck for sure. I think he's just going to be looking for more ways to add to that gas. Xixo has either the Azure Drake or Force of Nature. I think Force of Nature is too susceptible again to the Fan of Knives that that Xixo's been playing around for a while. And so he chooses to play Azure Drake. Plus Drake just draws the card too, which you want with Emperor Thor's.
All right, well, Cifka, I was going to say earlier when he had the Drake in hand, he's got no spells to use it with, but suddenly Shiv and Fan give him 2 card draws, plus the ability to clean up the Drake. Picks up the SI, could also give him a bit of a better follow-up. I mean, this is lining up for StanCifka.
Do you want to use Deadly Poison instead of the Fan? I mean, Fan does draw you a card, but you get to set up the weapon.
Do you ever want a Cold Blood is the question.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind cold-blooding and going phase 2.
Because if he swipes... So here's the problem, is if there's a swipe, then suddenly, yes, you get the initiative back, but you've got nothing to get the initiative back with. And I think the swipe would come out either way if it were there. So giving a Cold Blood is essentially just pushing a second card onto this for the damage output, which may or may not be relevant.
You might be fearing like the fact that it doesn't have follow-up plays.
Right.
But you don't have follow-up plays whether or not you... Like at this point, you don't really have a position to argue.
Not do the
because if you don't draw another minion anyways, you're in the exact same position, and Cold Blood's just sitting as a dead card.
And you could have gotten an extra 8 damage over 2 turns, assuming that. Oh my goodness, Fandral off the top.
Yeah.
For the perfect Wrath on the 4 health minion.
It's really convenient.
Yep. And Shadow Strike can at least answer the Fandral, which is one of the better things, but still.
So this is exactly why we're talking about like why it's okay to go for that Cold Blood play, because you know, he didn't actually have it. And Cold Blood's just sitting there dead in the hand for a while. And if you drew Gadget's in, most likely using Cold Blood as just like this buff to the Auctioneer.
It would have to be, a card draw or a Conceal to get 2 swings off of it, usually. But there's only 1 Conceal in the list. Cifka did opt to cut, to 1 Cold Blood, 1 Conceal, and plays 1 Shadow Step on top with 2 Farseers. So very much anti-aggro, not what you want to have here against this Druid.
I wonder if Cifka, I mean, he wants to kill Fandral. Shadow Strike is clean, but perhaps he wants to draw with the Fan. You know,
I like that a lot more. You're right.
Just to be able to get deeper into his deck. Shadow Strike will always have relevance to, to a certain extent against stuff. But then here's like another awkward thing. Like he didn't pick up SI, so it's not a clean kill. So you still have to wait to play that Tomb Pillager.
It's all right. I mean, ultimately, as long as the Druid doesn't get more on board, which, based on how he's been playing, it doesn't seem like he could have like more of the same type of follow-up. So you should be able to get that 5/4, quote unquote, unanswered unless swipe hits.
Emperor, the only minion in Xixo, who's looking very much like StanCifka at this point, a handful of spells.
Yeah, it looks like they're both in the same spot and hoping they keep drawing minions.
What year is this? Shadow Step in Rogue deck.
Double Farce here against aggro, 1 sap. He's not playing against like this type of mid-range metagame when he made the Rogue deck.
Just Leroy Shadow Step just blows my mind. Like that's just, I can't believe people would still be willing to do that, but it makes sense on paper. Like, yeah, I get more damage. Like instead of 2 Cold Bloods, one's 4 damage, one's 6 damage.
Yeah.
If only works out that conveniently.
It never does.
Xixo does actually have the ability to flood the board. He did see 2 fans used.
Yep, so the amount of AoE left in StanCifka's deck is basically non-existent. So if you just flood the board and you Savage Roar on the back of it, you should usually be able to push enough damage to put the rogue super low, or at the very least trade your 2/2s up into the 5/4 if nothing happens. So
I'm looking at the amount of conceals that Cifka has, and I only see one.
right, there's only one. The deck has been made to tech against aggro super hard, and this is not a matchup you're happy to have only one sap in the early stages. Like,
Yeah, it makes sense with the Shiv
Yeah.
and the Shadow Step.
one Shadow Strike, he's playing 2 Farseers, 1 Shadow Strike, very heavy on the
Too
threes.
far. So yeah, it does make it seem like he's just trying not to die to fast decks. I mean, he does ban Shaman.
And he wrecks Zoo. With this exact
Okay.
list, I think he does a lot better against a Zoo.
That does make sense.
So it's a meta call that ended up, in this specific case, in this match, not being necessarily the best. But the rest of Xixo's lineup is pretty vulnerable to this type of deck, I think. A lot more so than the current one.
Savage Roar for 12 damage on top of the 6, 8, 11. So that's 23, and that is over lethal. Xixo able to win game 1 here, and I think the Rogue just succumbed to everything that every other Rogue has experienced at one point, which is you just draw spells and not enough minions.
Right, we had the same scenario earlier, actually, where Cifka had a handful of situational spells and ended up having the Auctioneer. And I was saying to Firebat, imagine the same hand without Auctioneer. Suddenly you end up with the worst possible Rogue hand.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of live and die by it, but
Yeah.
you also have to kind of wonder, like, how useful, like, sometimes does Cifka play a little bit too wastefully or too aggressively? I mean, it's hard to say because the Drew is putting out threats nonstop.
Sure.
But I always go back and I feel like Rogue games could have gone a little bit differently based off how you choose to navigate it. And that's kind of what makes the deck so fun.
Yeah,
the
right,
fact
like
that you
that-
can
that-
always do something differently.
Sure, like the Fan of Knives play was interesting as well, because he dug through his deck with the Fan of Knives on the Fandral. Didn't have to. Technically could have just used the Deadly Poison. And then when Force of Nature comes out, which you don't play around since it's not in the initial deck list,
Yep.
having
He
the
had a
Blood Mage
Thalnos.
plus, exactly, he got
Yeah.
Thalnos in the end, so just having it at that point would have also cleaned up the board and then allowed him to maybe extend the game by 1 turn, but you can't know that.
You don't really play
Right.
around this Force of Nature. Or, even Mire Keeper to an extent does have
A little bit of
somewhat,
value to
yeah.
it, maybe,
I mean, Cifka still got in range of potential lethal. He was setting up for like a Leroy top deck
Shadow
to potentially
Step,
win.
yeah.
Still a little bit dicey. So whatever. Game number 1's in the books, and now we're gonna go into game 2 here. I'm kind of sad that Cifka's Warlock was banned. I wanted to see some of that Warlock.
I mean, I don't mind Reno Lock too much. I think there's another player in the event who brought Reno Lock as well.
in the same group.
Yeah, I think so
it's
too.
Shishwai.
Yeah. He's the same.
Just looking through.
I realize now that
no.
like if you pronounce Xixo in Chinese, doesn't it sound like Xixo a little bit?
Kind
little
of,
bit,
man.
yeah.
It's Xixo.
Xixo.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
XI is like a SH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Xixo is playing Reno Lock, and so is StanCifka. So we might be able to see some of it. I just feel like that's kind of the wild card right now. Most people expect Warlocks to play Zoo, which as a result of that means that they're not preparing as much against Reno, so you kind of have to ban it.
It's time
For the
for
format of 7/7. No, it's just
well, specifically,
Young
I was
Priestess.
actually gonna say it's time for Xixo's Jank Zoo.
Jiangsu.
Yeah, this got Young Priestess,
Yeah, it's
Lance Carrier.
I mean, it's pretty good. The Young Priestess is all right. If
You
you're
keep
banning,
it?
sure, against Shaman.
I mean, you play Young Priestess, and you have Abuse Sergeant and Lance Carrier as follow-up buffs to make sure to answer anything, anywhere ranging from Totem Golem, Totem Shock to
Trog,
Totem
yeah.
Golem.
Yeah.
You are susceptible to a Flame Juggler, though. Oh,
Man, that would be painful.
That would just be lights out, I think.
Yeah. Oh
Okay,
well, never
there you
mind.
go.
You know, can just get.
Got that Flame Imp.
Oh man, to prevent the Tunnel Trog from doing even Void Walker. That's gonna be a very
Yeah.
onboard zoo for 6-0.
All right, so already a world of choices. I
Yeah.
mean, Xixo has 4 plays, realistically 2, but I think Flame Imp is still your strongest bet. You get the easiest trade on Tunnel Trog, except when Tunnel Trog can do this, which is Tunnel Trog, Coin, and Lightning Bolt.
It's kind of the nightmare scenario. I mean, on the flip side, that means that his turn 2 is not gonna be, even worse for you. Because if they get Rock Biter, then they can sometimes just follow it up with Totem Golem. Where in this case, it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, I think Rock Biter is actually the worst case scenario because you're afraid of the Totem Golem the next turn. But in this case, if StanCifka pretty much only has Lightning Bolt.
Still not very good for Xixo once that hits. I mean, he does have double 1-drop on the back of it, then starts to be able to live tap on 3 with another 1-drop if he doesn't find an Im-Gang boss or Darkshire Councilman. So
is there any merit to waiting here from StanCifka's side? I think you can always think about playing a little bit slower because your hand is double Doomhammer and thing from below.
So you mean just bolt now and keep the Tunnel Trog, play it on 2 naturally, and then wait a little bit longer?
Yeah, I mean that's something. That's like how valuable is keeping the coin. I mean, I'm totally in the camp for this to play Lightning Bolt, but it's something worth evaluating for sure. And StanCifka just ropes it down, just to go over the possibilities. I don't think it's worth it because I think the totems are too weak to fight on their own against Zoo, who's always just going to be able to peck away at whatever you place. You know, the 2-1s, the 1-1s are just going to kill the 0-2s.
And this is a really interesting spot because the buff from the Young Priestess wasn't really too impactful. But when it'll start shining is when you have all these little 2-1s and 1-2s that are stacking up against each other and buffing one another, and then suddenly Defensive Argus hits, and you end up with this really crazy mid-game. And the Young Priestess is not a priority target because it doesn't have good stats, but it makes everything snowball even harder.
I mean, if Young Priestess can just go off one more time, it's already kind of an insane value.
Yeah.
It's got 2-3 for 1 mana, and I believe usually cards like that with that kind of stat line require an elaborate setup or a downside like Zombie Chow. So Xixo, if he's able to prioritize keeping this alive, the Young Priestess alive, I think it's very worth it. Even more so than the Voidwalker, even though it has taunt.
I mean, the perfect stat line here, I mean, it's a 4-1 permanently. Like, that's never changing. The buff from the Lance Carrier is a permanent one.
It's so funny to me.
Yeah.
It's a 4-1. People always mock things like the Dusk Boar or whatever it's called.
Yeah, the 4-1 2-drop.
Yeah.
One of the funny things, though, it's Argent. I think Lance Carrier was waiting for its time in many cases for a while. I still don't think it's necessarily just better than a standard Zoo. But the moment Argent Squire is playable and Voidwalker in the same deck makes sense, then...
I still look at Direwolf Alpha, and I think it does it kind of what Lance Carrier wants to do, but more consistently because it has slightly better attack itself. That 1-1 ain't half bad. It forces Xixo to trade in a way that's a little bit awkward. But Defensive Argus is a great draw. Oh, man.
This is exactly what we were talking about a second ago, which is Defensive Argus makes this entire board a complete nightmare. And this will protect a Flame Tongue. Kill on the Young Priestess. Oh, man. A 5-2. What's going on, bro?
He's just buffing other stuff too, and this is kind of like this is exactly what Zoo was in 2013 when Reynad unleashed it upon the world and introduced its popularity to the point where it dominated everything. The fact that you can get bored early and the fact that you can keep securing it. This is back when Blood Imp was also super busted too.
Right.
People would play all these health buff things because once you get early boards, you're never letting it go. Argent Commander, I still can't get over it. The fact that it's in this deck. It's like, it's just going to sit there as this 4 damage charge minion that could have been Leroy or something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the list there's also the Doom Guards as well. So very often this guy ends up being discarded. I find that usually the Argent Commander doesn't come out
too clunky
unless you find like the right matchup, which would be Azure Drake or something like Gadget's Hand, where suddenly Doom Guard, you don't want to be trading off your entire hand for it.
Yeah. But just like that, the game is over. Argent Commander's going to end this game. Or Soulfire.
Even Soulfire, why not? This list is one of the more aggressive ones. It's playing so many 1-drops. It's really back to the roots of what Zoo used to be.
Xixo is the best lists, best decks. It's so interesting that this deck list has gone so flawlessly, but I think it has to go into his overall strategy himself.
Right. I think it's just a part of the bigger.
Yeah. He's saying like these decks will definitely be really common, especially shamans and whatever else. And Dragon Warriors, I'll be able to use this deck list to really punish that super heavily. And now he's doing a great job. He's up 2-0.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that it lets him also not ban Shaman the same way that other players are systematically banning it. Because there are other matchups where you're happier maybe to ban those if they both show up at the same time. Because what happens very often is you ban Shaman, suddenly another deck ends up being an issue, say Reno Lock in this case. So you can only ban one of them.
Yeah, and the thing about the current state of Shaman is that it's very beatable, I think, in my opinion. Even though, Shaman's like, we can make posts about 4-mana 7/7s to the day we die, and some of them will still get chuckles. But the point is that they are manageable to a certain extent. They sure can beat anybody, but it's more about like. A lot of decks have answers to it. Zoo Warlock, a lot of forms of Warrior.
Warrior especially, I think, came up as a result of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're able to fight back against Shaman. I don't think it's that bad of an idea to leave it open and ban something else.
Yeah, I kind of like the overall strategy from Xixo. I mean, even his Yogg Druid that he ends up bringing, it's got an okay. It can do okay even against those like crazy openers if you end up playing against it. But the fact that it's Conquest format means eventually you will run into one of those matchups. If most of your decks can beat Shaman, leaving it up is not even an issue.
All right, so with Warrior and Mage remaining here, what does Xixo choose to go with? More importantly, how is StanCifka going to target it down? Is there a deck that's good against both? We know that...
I'd say Tempo Mage is really Xixo's weaker deck of both, but we saw last series the Mage from Jab nearly take a game against Cifka, so if played in a similar fashion... Xixo's Mage could also get a win there.
I'm sensing a Warrior versus Warrior. I'm just feeling it, man. It's been a long time since we had something like that. And nothing screams long time like Warrior versus Warrior. Specifically Cthulhu Warrior versus Cthulhu Warrior, which is already a little bit more aggressive than the traditional control.
Right, it's not exactly the same, and it's not a fight for Elise, right? But who's got the Doom Callers?
I knew it.
No one.
I knew it.
No one's got Doom Callers.
Yeah, I just had a feeling, man, because it was like I'm trying to think like, well, what's Tempo Mage like? What are they super afraid of? I'm like, well, they're afraid of Warrior, and I'm like, well, that means if Cifka keeps a Warrior, his worst is just a Warrior Mirror, which isn't so bad. So maybe he'll just go with that. Now, keep in mind, there are some differences.
I think the Hearthstone Jones is really like I'm not sure if it's a plus or a negative. In the matchup.
It's a plus.
It's a plus in general, but
you want to shut down Gorehowl, except
there's none.
Cifka doesn't have a Gorehowl in this deck.
Does not play it.
He plays a Weaponsmith because again he's trying to gear towards anti-aggro.
Yeah, Cifka's targeting aggro very, very hard, and we see here Xixo with a Doomsayer in the starting hand.
Yeah, so with some brief analysis, and by brief I just mean looking at the fact that Xixo has Deathwing and Cifka doesn't, I have to imagine that Xixo is slightly favored because he actually has late game threats. They both made similar cuts. The only difference, of course, being that Cifka is playing Emperor Thaurissan, but he doesn't have the Doom Caller, and that's where it gets really nutty. Because in the mirror, if you're able to play Emperor Thaurissan on one of those minions, and reduce Bran and Doomcaller, and then you can play
both of them are
Cthulhu's
playing
in your deck.
Yeah, both of them are playing no Doomcallers, so they're not aiming to get the control matchups. The only difference is StanCifka simply lacks the big threat to finish off the game after the Cthulhu, but he did get an extra bit of armor up during these early turns. Didn't seem to matter too much, but
I mean, armor always matters in the control warrior mirror. I mean, armor always matters in general. Like, if there is a threshold of which like you just have too much life, your opponent can't beat you anymore. But that usually comes in the very late stages of the game if you run your opponent out of cards. For now, I think Cifka is just seeing if he wants to use his Disciple of Cthulhu or Ravnugul. And I really like the purple school of thought. And I know he's not the first person to think of this, but he's the one who kind of like punched it into my head repeatedly over a few beers. He kept saying that there's a lot of times in Hearthstone you're going to be met with an opportunity to use a clean removal or something slightly less clean, but because you have two of one option and one of the other, you should probably use the two of one option so you keep your
second versatility, I guess. The versatility of the second one is worth more.
You keep your hand as robust as possible.
I see.
And so that was the philosophy that he kind of pushing. He says the reason why is because many times in the game is constantly evolving, so you're not going to always have the opportunity to get the best removal scenarios every single time. So, you know, cards like Disciple of Cthulhu, for example, what it does is it forces the opponent's Fiery War Axe to attack into it suboptimally, and then all of a sudden cards like Ravaging Ghoul
Stay alive,
and you do have that Execute Enabler anyways. So I don't mind it, you know.
And it's also enabling Twin Imps a little bit earlier, Ancient Shield Bearer, if that comes in to be something relevant.
That's also extremely relevant too.
Yeah. There's not that many enablers in Cthulhu Warrior. I remember the initial lists were running like very heavy. Now it's down to those Disciples and the Cthulhu's Chosens, with sometimes 2 Beckoners, more often than not nowadays 1. So you have to make use of those very precious ones. Also, Cifka is not running Bran Bronzebeard, which makes the whole enabling of Cthulhu even clunkier if you don't use them early.
Well, I mean, he's got the enabler anyway, so everything's fine. Cifka introduced with an interesting scenario here of how he wants to take out the Justicar. Choose the weapon.
This is a really big deal, by the way. The earlier Justicar means so much in any Warrior Mirror match, whereas right now Cifka is the one who's going to be falling behind armor count-wise over the course of the game. If they both play for armor, just armor up, tank up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, well, there goes something to help. I think there's a double slam in Cifka's list. So, a lot more cycle than you'd expect.
I'm trying to see the merits of Cifka answering the Emperor with his own Emperor, but I
mean, would you rather be able to get brawl value yourself later, or is that just something Xixo never plays into, number one?
That is a good
question.
question.
Or force his brawl out earlier?
That's a really good question. How much better does brawl get in this matchup?
Yeah.
Not really that great. I mean, Warrior's going to be plopping single threats for a while, and not only that, but they'll be playing around Brawl. So, like, even if they have 2 minions on board, they might just, like, not play any more minions and keep attacking you.
Yeah, ever, right? Like, there's a good chance that Xixo simply never commits more to this than he has to. I mean, as long as he's got the tank up and he's got the extra damage over you, then he can just keep doing this all game. But he will go for the counter Emperor play.
Yeah, I think this is like the reason why is because ironically enough, which is you'll find this happen in Hearthstone all the time, is that one of the best or one of the most inconvenient or the best ways to deal with it is to do the exact same thing.
Dr. Boom back like, all over again.
Play Boom in the Boom, or like Hunter cards counter Hunter. Yeah, those are really funny.
Right, very funny mirror there.
Yeah, ironies in Hearthstone in a lot of ways.
That's true.
But not to mention that you just kind of get them out of the way. So these trade at worst with your Fiery War Axe, which he did exactly the same thing as your opponent did. He played his Fiery War Axe and Disciple of Cthulhu. So when it's all said and done, you essentially just traded minions.
What's interesting too is I have to wonder if Cifka ever wants to draw off the slam or wants to take this to fatigue.
I think that's still a little bit too early to tell. I feel like Cthulhu Warrior Mirrors actually don't go to fatigue that very often.
True.
They, in the sense that they do go to the last few cards, but I don't think it's when you're both armoring up and you're out of cards, and then whoever takes more damage loses.
Sure.
That's what I mean by true fatigue. I think it's kind of like pseudo fatigue, where you run each other out of hand and you realize one person has won. So it's tricky, and sometimes you do need to keep up in the card count because you just need more threats to keep up or more removal pieces. So Cifka chooses to part ways, and instead of using his weapon here, and he keeps that charge up, which I think he's cognizant of Xixo's Harrison, and maybe he is trying to play into that fatigue plan.
Yeah, it seems like StanCifka, I mean, in the first 4 turns, he armored up twice more than Xixo, and I think the game plan is precisely that, is to get to that fatigue point. That's something Cifka does just about every time, by the way. I feel like he does this more often than most players who play non-fatigue geared decks. He will still try to take them a lot longer and just take the advantage of the extra hero powers.
Really like this ability to sneak in the Doomsayer here from Xixo, giving him very clean initiative with the Ancient Shield Bearer.
All right.
And I gotta admit, man, sometimes the names in Hearthstone, because you just memorize hundreds and hundreds of names of things. starts to eventually catch up to you, because some of them have so many similarities.
I mean, crowd favorite, tournament attendee, like all the TGT themed cards are the ones that confuse me the most
Really?
for the longest time.
I always found like those were easier because they're distinct. Ancient Shield Bearer versus Shield Maiden is like a little bit too similar sometimes. Or
Beckoner of Evil versus, I don't even know his name, the 5-minute 3/6. Crazed Worshipper?
Yeah.
Is that his name? See, I'm just, yeah.
The guy with the beard.
The dwarven dude.
Cifka,
kind of in an awkward spot here. I mean, no shield slams to start taking this away. He probably knows that he's got to keep those for the bigger minions, but without the armor count to make those shield slams work.
It's fine. He can just use his weapon here and then play the Ancient Shield Bearer himself and just armor up. I think what does matter, though, and it's like you said, if StanCifka is trying to play the long game against Xixo, which, you know, I don't blame him for doing so, then he's really far behind the fact that Xixo has played Justicar Trueheart way earlier than Cifka has.
Yeah. What's interesting, too, is that there's no brand for Cifka, so he can never get the, like, one-time extra double up on the 10 armor. Can never get the 20.
Right.
It's not usually a big deal, but in those fatigue wars where that's something he wants to capitalize on, becomes a disadvantage.
In the best case scenario, you usually drop a Doom Caller with Bran or get double Cthulhu, which is
pretty crazy.
Absurd.
Yeah. Which is what Emperor even makes sense sometimes in those lists. You get the crazy, unanswerable double Doom.
How good is Sylvanas in this position? I think Xixo is still not. No, he has to know. He has to know that Cifka doesn't have a Doom Caller.
He saw the entire list last game.
Okay.
With the StanCifka played against Jab. So.
But Sylvanas' timing is also important because Sylvanas is a counter to Cthulhu because you can't play Cthulhu into Sylvanas.
Yeah, the only time you can do it is when you're going to win anyway on the back of it, which never happens in mirror match for those types of control decks. But the 6/6 is really something you want to be sniping, I think, off of the Warriors, because there's no real way for them nowadays to enable like a clean trade unless they commit like a second ghoul to this, which means they don't have an execute enabler. So they have to ignore it, and then suddenly you just keep doing what you're doing.
Yep, and Cifka's going to use this opportunity to just hit Xixo and grab some of that life back that Xixo's been able to tank up over his opponent. I think Xixo's like 8 to 10 health ahead because he's had it for that many turns now.
Yeah.
And now it's just like a game of chicken.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a pretty
That's
big
a big game changer all of a sudden. Yeah. So I'm guessing the Arathi Weaponsmith could be coming out here where you end up giving a 6/6.
Yeah, you're going to take 6 damage in response, but you get to put out a 3/3 and a 4/2 with Divine Shield. That's not too bad.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're like missing out on the fact that you can play Justicar this turn, but you get to put some pressure onto your opponent.
And you get 2 armor on the back of it, so you get the extra hero power sprinkled in at the end. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the Justicar will finally let him equalize. I mean, it's still down to that Deathwing we spoke of earlier. As long as that's there, that's a huge problem for Cifka.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Xixo, too, he's got a lot more dead cards in the matchup because, like, the second Acolyte or... You know, he has a little bit too much draw compared to Cifka, who has... well, I mean, it's hard to say. Cifka also plays 2 Acolyte, too.
And he plays 2 slams, but he chose to use the first one without card draw.
Yeah, both these guys have really defensive tools in general, like Revenge, not that useful. And usually they're okay to play in the Warrior decks because you're playing Brawl. Oh, sorry, not Brawl. I was watching Brawl. Because you're playing at least Starseeker, so you can convert them.
But in this case, they're not really going to be transitioning or translating into anything else threat-wise. Now, this is a very good Brawl for Xixo. Ends up removing his own Acolyte, so the card draw is not going to come in as a problem. And also removes the 4/2 with Divine Shield, which is a lot more powerful than the 3/3. So one of the best possible outcomes for Xixo, I think.
Okay, Fire War Axe, pretty important draw. If Xixo didn't draw that, then he'd be probably weighing the idea of playing Cthulhu to clear the board.
Yeah, but it's still, you know, StanCifka now equalizing the armor. I think at this stage there's a good chance they both armor up to the exact same extent. The issue is that Shield Bearer worth it just yet, or are you going to be extending into something else?
Yeah, that's also another good question, considering that Cifka does have Shield Slam in his hand. But I think the 6/6 as pressure onto the board is too hard to ignore, and Xixo will be forced to answer it.
Oh, man. And look at that. Harrison Jones can give him an extra card. Again, how much does he really want to draw at this point, knowing that StanCifka is going for the fatigue game is a big question. And he will be using one Shield Slime. He knows the threats in the deck. There's Cthulhu and Cthulhu, and that's it. So the moment you just keep at least an Execute, you're good to go.
It's fascinating to me, the dynamic of like not wanting to play Harrison because you don't want to draw into fatigue until you have not enough cards in your hand for threats and you just play Harrison anyways. Or if Cifka is choosing not to attack because he wants Xixo to Harrison it.
Right.
And it's like this weird thing where like I'll trade 2 damage, which seems rather negligible, to have him go deeper into the fatigue.
Which will matter a lot because that translates sometimes in the later stages up to 7 damage fatigue ahead of time if you get like very deep into fatigue.
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't put it far from Cifka to be making those kinds of plays. Like, you know what? I'll just hold on to this. Like, he does have Execute, and that is one way he can kind of activate it using that second weapon. So I think maybe there's dual purpose in it. But I do have to think that somewhere down in the brain of Cifka, he's thinking about holding this weapon as anti-Harrison measure.
Yeah, you can also use the weapon alongside a slam, say to kill an Acolyte and make him draw 2 cards. So as long as that's there, Acolyte can't be played on an empty board. You know, usually when there's a weapon that's going to kill your Acolyte in the mirror match, you wouldn't necessarily want to play it. But you know there's not too many whirlwind effects. It's just really a problem for Xixo because the moment he plays anything on the board, he's sacrificing it and getting 0 value out of it.
Okay, well, Harrison does come out here. And doesn't really have that much of an alternative.
It's kind of like, do I play Acolyte or Harrison? Both do the same thing. One could be worse. So, big gamble there. And there is an Emperor Thorison hitting Sylvanas and Brawl.
Well, that means he'll guarantee win whatever comes out of that, but...
yeah, I mean, that's actually a good answer to Deathwing, possibly.
I think what also starts to get insane, too, is just the 0-mana removals that he can pair with other stuff. Like, if he wants to Cthulhu and remove, for example.
Sure.
I mean, it's a really good hand to Emperor. In general, Emperor with this deck is pretty underrated. People don't really think about Cthulhu decks and reducing the cost of it, but it's pretty strong when you combine it with so many cheap spells and removal.
Yeah, I think like Sylvanas Brawl is one of them. Doomcaller we spoke of with Bran in the list that do run those cards together. That's also a really big deal. But I think in this case, one of the most impactful outcomes is really Sylvanas Brawl against Deathwing or Cthulhu, whichever one ends up being the more important one, because Xixo has already used up his Sylvanas.
Yeah, you're right, for sure. So... well, I mean, Xixo's just going to get to work with the Gorehowl. No Harrison for Cifka. So he's just going to have to just take that Gorehowl beating over and over. And Gorehowl in itself is a win condition because it's just draining your opponent of so many cards that they can't exactly fight back on equal footing. It is a long-term play, though, but one that I think this Warrior can make.
Yeah, and Xixo is actually behind in armor. Never thought I'd say this, but... he is actually the one with the lower armor count at this stage. Despite starting with Justicar earlier, StanCifka's navigated to a position where he can actually maybe win the Fatigue War. And Xixo with the Dead Acolyte in hand does really want to play too much of his resources in here. He's going to end up sacrificing the coin to nothing, I think.
It's okay, though. I think you're sacrificing coin for nothing. I don't think coin really enables you to do anything.
No, sure. It's just to empty the hand at this point.
Which also, in turn, encourages Cifka to hero power pass because by him doing it, he just realizes that Xixo doesn't have a real play. So he's like, well, you got to make the first initiative. You got to make the first move.
And he's like 2 cards ahead. I think Xixo's at 4 cards less from what we saw, and StanCifka's on 6, which means eventually StanCifka's going to be 2 fatigue turns ahead of his opponent with the answers to Cthulhu and Deathwing.
Jeez.
That's a big deal.
It's kind of like those freeze mage mirrors where like both players are just playing so awkwardly to try to avoid overdrawing, like flame striking an empty board, that kind of silly stuff.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ravaging Ghoul with the slam on the back of it, just to kill the 3/3, not draw, and you keep Revenge to enable Execute on the big guys later, and you're still okay. But I mean that also leaves you open to being beat down by those mid-range, Bran plus Ghoul. Where it's like a little awkward that you end up taking like 3 to 6 damage every turn for no reason.
Man, this turn from Cifka.
Yeah.
I mean, he can dump Slam with the Revenge.
Do you ever Acolyte Brawl? Just for... it's kind of awkward.
Yeah, I mean, Acolyte's just too much of a liability. I think if you're going to commit to the Fatigue plan, you can just Revenge and then slam it.
Sure. The same thing as Ghoul, effectively. The only difference is you're actually keeping a minion for later.
Yeah.
Which might be more impactful as well.
It's just so slow, and I
mean,
don't know.
I kind of like that.
The one thing that I don't like is that...
Uh-oh.
Okay.
That's a lot of armor.
Ancient Shield Bearer.
Yeah. What are you going to say? Sorry?
57 armor. Oh my god. That's 71 health? No, 81 health.
Yeah, we're going to say what didn't you like about the play? Like the slam with Revenge?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Is that you know, some of his cheap removal with Execute is gone now. So, like, now he has 2 Executes and he has 1 Ravaging Ghoul, so... You know, removing it becomes a little bit more awkward.
Could that be the Brawl, though? You play 2 Acolytes with the Brawl, suddenly one of them is guaranteed to die? Or, again, are you worried about the second Ravaging Ghoul, which you know hasn't come out, because you keep track of everything if you're Cifka? And then suddenly you might end up drawing an equal amount of Fatigue.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about for sure. I don't know if that ends up being the case here. I mean, Cifka can remove this.
Yeah.
He's not playing cards like Sylvanas, though. And by not playing Sylvanas, I think he's just trying to time it, because I think he's well aware of, like, Xixo's Deathwing / Cthulhu. Neither of those can go onto Sylvanas. He knows his opponent's already played Sylvanas. So the moment he plays Sylvanas, his opponent can't play something and steal it back.
Right.
Because you can play your own Sylvanas, Shield Slam it, and steal your opponent's.
Since it's already been played, then...
There's, like, so much, like, nuanced mind games of what's going on with holding cards and trying to telegraph information of what each other has and holding it back from the other opponent. It's just, it's kind of nuts, man.
Yeah, I think the big deal here for Cifka is the fact that he's got the Acolytes as potential dummies when he needs to get the second Brawl without Sylvanas, let's say. So there's always the possibility that he uses those as an ability to just maybe win a Brawl on the back of something terrible, but still not get overly punished because there's no more AoE.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that for sure. All right, that's a brand. I don't really see too much of a good thing going here.
Is there a whoa, the Execute on the Ghoul. Okay, so he wants to keep this at 6, but what for? I thought the weapon hit was fine.
Ancient Shield Bearer. I don't know. I feel like he could have definitely used a Gorehowl hit there, but I think the 6 attack only really matters for 2 cards, and that's the Twin Emperor Veclor as well as the Ancient Shield Bearer, which I think Cifka's used both of, unless
they've all been played. Yeah, everything's been played among those. I think maybe it's down to being able to kill another minion with the Gorehowl and then having the 5 for the Sylvanas. So you're able to kill 2 back-to-back, but it kind of amounts to the same thing in the long run.
Oh, Xixo's almost out of cards, and he's got more draw cards. And this is something that Cifka was playing into with things like the Arathi Weaponsmith trying to bait the Harrison from attacking it. One thing that also was good about Cifka's play a few turns ago was that he actually pushed multiple cards out of his hand, and so he can keep passing. And Xixo didn't have that same exact luxury for a while. He had to actually play minions onto the board because his hand got too full.
Also, now that the Ghoul is out, Cifka knows that his Acolytes are never going to overdraw too much, at the very least, because there can be, you know, a streak of AoE from Xixo's part to make him overdraw. So if he plays, say, the Beckoner of Evil and the Ghoul trades into it for whatever reason, then suddenly the Acolyte can just trade 1 for 1, and he's still going to be ahead in the Fatigue game.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure. Well, does that entice Cifka to... Oh, he just passes. Oh,
man.
All right, so the onus is on Xixo to start putting on reasonable pressure. Cifka does hold brawls, though, and Xixo is cognizant of that. So he can't play too many minions into this brawl.
You can't wait too long because you're eventually going to die to your own lack of options.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point, Cifka's got it, unless a disaster occurs. With the amount of tracking of cards he's been doing, This 3-3 is the only issue he's got to face, because as long as this is whittling down his armor gain, then for all the advantages he's got for being ahead in fatigue, or one turn behind that is, then the 3-3 ends up negating a good portion of that.
If Cifka's last card is like another shield block, I don't think he minds even just passing again. Just burning another card. The only thing that I don't like is that he's taking a little bit of chip damage here and there from the Ravaging Ghoul, and that will end up mattering if it becomes this close into fatigue, because you can see that they're relatively even in health counts. And so if Cifka wants to, definitely wants to remove that Ravaging Ghoul, but doesn't have that weapon, doesn't have like convenient things. He doesn't have bash.
Yeah, I mean, if you play Acolyte into Cthulhu, you just get punished really hard is the issue. Like, you basically have to commit everything but the Acolyte until Cthulhu comes out.
Oh, man. Shield slamming a 3-3.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah.
The last card might be shield block number 2.
Yeah, because I don't remember Cifka playing a shield block, because I think he wouldn't have, based off like how early he started playing for fatigue.
All right. Well, Xixo, if he commits Bran with the Disciple of Cthulhu, he does double buff Cthulhu and deal 4 damage to his opponent. He also is forcing Cifka to answer this, lest the Bran stays alive and Cthulhu comes out to just slam twice the amount of damage. But I guess if that happens, then double Acolyte is no longer a problem, and you can develop those without too much of an issue.
Yeah, I guess Xixo's best play. It might just be the Cthulhu itself.
I think Bran Disciple seems like the only.
What are you trying to accomplish though with that?
I mean, the same thing you would if you waited, because in the end you're still gonna end up having to play those, right? And there's a chance that somehow your Bran lives. You've seen the shield slams, so the only things left are executes, and those have no enablers left in the deck. So the only way that Bran dies is if StanCifka decides to overcommit to deny it, which means he plays Cthulhu, which means you cannot, possibly clear it off with Disciple.
Yeah,
or
I guess. But Cifka also has kept his Sylvanas, meaning that no matter how bad the board gets,
he gets it back.
He just steals it.
Yeah.
Sylvanas and Brawl. So I feel like Xixo has to be the one who presents the initiative of threat. But he's in a pretty good spot where he doesn't necessarily need to worry too much about it.
So let's assume that here the Disciple is played, execute the Cthulhu, and then suddenly Xixo gets to play his own Cthulhu on the following turn, loses it to Sylvanas, plays Deathwing. StanCifka still has second Brawl with 3 minions on the back of that, or at least like a good amount of them, and he still wins with having only an Acolyte that never gets hit by just willing down or winning the Fatigue War.
Okay. Well, Xixo is 2 ahead of Fatigue, and Cifka is taking 2 damage, so it essentially feels that they're like even-ish.
Yeah, I think Cifka right now, like if he plays a 2-3, I don't know if this is Xixo calculating the Gorehowl perfectly, but the Gorehowl is at 6-1 still, which means that it will kill the 2-3 and the 5-5 Sylvanas once she comes out, if she doesn't get brawled off immediately, or if she survives the brawl, without having to commit the shield slam on the back of it. So
yes, I think right now they're also trying to count how much fatigue damage or fatigue turns they really take. And right now Cifka's at 84 health. 84.
82. No, Cifka's at 84, yeah, and his opponent is at 82.
Trying to do some very quick math here, and it's hard because I actually don't have the things memorized. I do know the formula though. You take the 2 numbers that fatigue will hit, and then you divide it by 2. Nah, we'll just go ahead and play it. Like, let's see what happens instead of trying to calculate too far. I think Cifka might just ride this out, because essentially what the Disciple of Cthulhu does is just equalize the fatigue.
I think it comes down to the Cthulhu turn as well, is because if you play it and they're about to die, then the amount of damage that Cthulhu lands is a big deal.
And then Cifka plays
Sylv Brawl and cannot armor up on the back of it, so that skips an extra 4 health gain.
He also has 2 Brawls. I mean,
he could just try to randomize play minion Brawl and then try again.
There is a world where he can try and use Beckoner of Evil brawl. I don't know, man. I think this kind of situation, you have to actually sit down and count, and I kind of want to pen.
What if you were to play Beckoner of Evil plus Acolyte Brawl right now? Because the Acolyte does not get double draw ever, right? There's no world in which double draw ever happens. So it only draws you one card, or draws your opponent one card at the very most. So you're still always ahead in fatigue, and you're denying the chip, and you take the initiative on even increasing his fatigue further.
Keep talking, Noxious. I'm going to calculate some stuff.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, I'm looking at this, and it looks like with the amount of armor he's at, so 85.
+2, +3, +4, +5. Oh, crap.
It's like,
oh, my God. I keep messing up on the calculator. Dang. Okay, this is like hard for me, and I'm like trying to go through it. So they at least can take
12 turns, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's about 12 to 13 turns, I think, before fatigue becomes an auto-lethal on Cthulhu.
13 turns.
Yeah.
Where no, actually, no, they're gaining 4 per turn.
Yeah, I'm calculating the +4. And with the Cthulhu damage,
so
I think it amounts to that.
15 turns.
Yeah.
But that's assuming that they're taking equal amount, and Sifka doesn't manage to put out pressure.
Which he can if he decides to go for the brawl play with the Acolyte. Because, again, he only draws one card at most. And if he loses this, I guess that's the worst-case scenario. But at least...
Okay. I mean, all of a sudden he takes one additional. Unless
he
Xixo
takes
plays.
less, actually. Yeah, it depends how Xixo wants to play this.
Do you want a Cthulhu now?
I think you do. I think
Make him draw 3 more?
Yeah. And then suddenly StanCifka's on the back foot. You know Sylvanas comes out to answer it because there's no more enabler for the second execute. And then you Deathwing and nothing gets answered unless he plays more into it.
Well, then he brawls.
Yeah, that's the hope.
For the Beckoner of Evil, and then you just kind of damage settle.
And you hope that it works.
You split the pot and
Exactly. You both even out, and then you wait.
A lot of mind games back and forth. Here we go. So that's an additional 15 damage to Sifka. Oh, excuse me. There's actually another draw after that.
Yep.
So a very painful exchange.
But it is one that I think he wanted to trigger as early as possible to get the Sylvanas. The only problem is
Deathwing.
The Deathwing is not answered yet.
Unless, I mean,
you have to play. You have to enable the execute.
If Sylvanas survives.
Oh goodness, that is exactly what the Gorehal was looking for, and that is it.
Know.
Sifka is gonna have to leave this one.
That was a really tense back and forth game. Sifka instantly concedes because he knows that he can just kind of give it up. But
I thought he was gonna play the Beckoner of Evil instead of the Acolyte at that last point instead of playing that into the brawl, because he had to steal Cthulhu to force the Deathwing.
Yeah, that was a pretty hard game just to even cast. I can't imagine calculating it from their perspective. You can see that they were like, even though the plays end up becoming relatively simple, like hero power pass, you have to think about every juncture.
Every single possible turn, and the possibilities of Cthulhu coming down on turn X or Y.
Right, and do I have enough health buffer to take this much damage if it went wrong or etc. So Sifka, I definitely felt like Sifka was unfavored for a while though.
Yeah, at the very end there, it was a little bit too close.
When you're playing Revenge and Arathi Weaponsmith, and they have Gorehowl and Deathwing, it's pretty obvious who's
And the Doomslayer turn was also a really big deal because that was where Sifka's playing Revenge, there's a Doomslayer in Xixo's list, which gives him a bit of a free pass in the mid game or late game to get a bit of initiative.
That is a 3-0 lead for Xixo.
I believe he's won with the Druid. He's won with the Warrior. I don't think he's won yet with the... Oh, yeah, the Zoo one as well.
He did win the
3-0,
the Jank Zoo. So now he's got 3-0 lead. Only has to win with his...
Mage.
I have Sifka's. His Mage? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Xixo's got the Mage left in the lineup. And that is, according to Firebat, the deck that should make Xixo lose more than
Firebat's a hater, man.
I know. He's got a lot of those. He makes a lot of those calls.
Grew up in the streets of Detroit. He kind of fights for his own a little bit too much. I think he's contesting it too much. I think Tempo Mage is okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those decks that relies heavily on. It's almost like you have to get one of two game plans. Either you're curving out like Tempo Mage, or you get the perfect setup, especially in those Antonitis lists, where you get to play the control game, like Freeze Mage, with some mid-game pushes with Flame Wakers.
I know that Firebat's backing up with his own experiences and statistics. He's talking about how he went 0-3 when practice matches, and then he 3-0'd his opponent's Tempo Mage.
He said, I think Xixo lost 8 matches against him in practice. Like,
Right.
6-0 and 0-8 with this mage. It's complete garbage. It's a jank deck that's worthless. And then you see Jab just pile the deck to near victory
Right.
in the last series.
Or even 601 with his own Tempo
Right,
Mage.
with the Tempo Mage in the first round against
I mean,
Xixo.
you don't have to be a fan of the deck for it to beat you. So
Yep.
That's something to consider as well.
Life coach knows that.
I think 6-0 needed a bathroom break or something like that.
Sure.
'Cause, that was a really long game. But the winner of this series will go on to day 3 in the first place of the group. The winner of this tournament gets 25K, so it's a pretty good, nice pocket change there for whoever wins.
Pocket change.
Whoever Sifka, well, I said that sarcastically.
Sure.
Sifka, if he loses this and drops it, it's going to be really hard to 4-0 a deck. Although Tempo Mage is one of them.
I was going to say, one of those decks that
Yep.
can actually beat itself just on the like, it's trying to do many things at once, especially this list that we see from 6-0 with the Archmage and Tinnitus. It's one of those decks that just can have a very dead draw. Because if you're trying to do, like, to split the spells between your Flamewakers early game and the Archmage late game, you have to land the perfect Kabbalist Tomes, and his list doesn't run those. He's not even playing the extra spells. He's playing Water Elementals for tempo a little bit more.
Sure. So if that happens, where 6-0 loses, or StanCifka loses, they drop to the winner of our other two players of Xixo
and
Jab.
Jab.
I'm butchering the name, man. I should have no excuse. I should know how to pronounce this.
Do you speak Chinese fluently? Xiao.
Mingley. So I don't know what to say, man. It's hard to say these names because they have specific tones too.
Xie, I guess.
Yeah, Shuai, I think.
Shuai. Whatever.
I do know Shuai in Chinese means handsome.
I know Xie is like just a common pronoun or common noun of people. That's all I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. As far as our Chinese goes.
Yeah,
that's
the most I can do.
Let's go into game number 4 here. Mage versus the Warrior. This is the best matchup, I think, for Sifka on paper.
But Man Worm openers will require Fiery Wind Axe to be there, and there it is. So StanCifka does find the card that probably gives this type of deck the highest win rate margin.
Yeah, certainly.
When it is or isn't there.
I do like that 6-0 was thinking outside the box a little bit, saying Water Elemental is so impactful against Warrior to stop their weapon flow that I can just keep it, even though it's a turn 4 play, and you do generally want like 1 to 3 mana plays.
Yeah.
And 6-0 as a result is stuck just hero powering, and this is like a really awful spot to be in as the mage. You just want to be able to accelerate onto the board very quickly.
Yeah, I think one of the big things too is that Sifka picked up the 2 cards in his deck that are playable and hyper effective before turn 2. Back to back, the Beckoner and the War Axe give him an answer to just about anything. And suddenly 6-0 is going to have to start considering already whether or not he wants to play for the Archmage that he's already got, or if he wants to play for more the gain the board and lose to Brawl, where he just tries to play maybe into the Brawl a bit more heavily.
I think whichever he feels like is better chances based off his hand. He's only got 1 spell in hand right now, so I'm not really feeling the Archmage Antonitis situation. Well,
suddenly, I mean, does that really change too much? You can play the Water Elemental on curve and keep your spells open, so your options are still available later on.
Yeah, I don't mind that Water Elemental now. I think there's also a case for Flamewaker, but Water Elemental will maybe even draw out like a really annoying card like Execute, and you can tuck Flamewaker behind the taunt so that way it can't die.
Yeah, you've also got the thing to worry about, which is Sylvanas Shield Slam when you end up playing the Archmage, so you have to worry a little bit about that. If that can bait a Shield Slam this early, then that would have also been pretty good. But 1 of 4 removal pieces for Sifka.
Sifka draws the Brawl. I think someone mentioned to me that if you're going first, your odds of drawing Brawl by turn 5, if you mulligan super hard for it, is a little cut under 50%. I think
it was like 47, yeah. 47%.
And it goes like slightly above 50% for going second because you're 1 card deeper on your turn 5.
Yeah, when you mulligan hard for any card, I think it's a little bit above 50.
It's like 52.
Yeah.
So,
anyway.
it sounds a little bit of oversimplification to say it's like 50-50, but it just feels like if you're going to play around that, But I don't think most people even try to go super hard for Brawl against this matchup. I think they just go for that War Axe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do need to answer the apprentices. Even the Cold Sorcerer, it looks like nothing, but it's a 3-2 that you have to handle.
Right.
And if you end up just using slams into it, never cycling, means the Flame Waker is not answered effectively.
Right.
And Sylvanas does get played before the Archmage turns later on.
And that's why I think going for Minion Flood is still better than the Archmage play right off the bat, because there's a lower chance that he has that Brawl versus he's always going to try to mulligan for those Fiery War Axes and stuff. So Xixo introduced with this Sylvanas is kind of annoying. He can't really kill off his own Wild Elemental very conveniently.
He could technically just try to Arcane Missiles this all the way and give the Water Elemental, but it gives you so much, such a gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, he might even just play Face of Summoner, maybe freeze Sylvanas in its path.
He just attack ping, yeah. Freeze ping and then ping it again on the following turn. That way, if there's something to trade the Water Elemental into, then you just do that. And then ping the Sylv.
What Face of Summoner might even do is encourage his opponent to Brawl.
Early, yeah.
Like if he plays Mana Worm and the Face of Summoner, then it's kind of like, please brawl me type of scenario.
They're kind of begging for it at this point.
So he's taking it really slow. And I mean, this is one of the things where, again, like Xixo is already understanding that he can't win through the traditional means of like just playing the best possible play every single turn. And this is, again, like one of those things that you have to be extremely fine-tuned with not just your deck, but also the matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to recognize sometimes when you have to be playing the Archmage play and Tempo Mage, because and it's actually kind of interesting because so many people dislike Archmage and Antonidas in this type of mage list, right? It's not even in every single one of them, and it's mostly been added to it because of those, like the hyper-polarized warrior types, right? There's a Dragon Warrior, you've got the Tempo Warrior, and maybe Pirate Warrior on the lower end, and then it's Cthulhu Warrior, and then it's the Control Warrior standard list, and suddenly, without Archmage, you do very poorly against those unless you God draw them.
The brilliance of Xixo's play is that Cifka doesn't actually have really good follow-up to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can execute, but like, is that really how you want to be spending your execute? It's so tough, man. Dealing 1 damage.
I mean, the thing is, if you're in Xixo's spot, you know that there's no Ravaging Ghoul possibility that's going to feel good. So that was pretty sweet for him. And on the flip side, the play that StanCifka makes also guarantees that Xixo does not get to get value out of the Water Elemental before the ping. But I figure like the value that Execute represented might have been higher than a 6-3.
I think it's okay though, in the context of like he wants to get his Ancient Shield Bearers higher value because he knows that Xixo is going to be saving up for a huge swing turn. So
still no enabler though, so can't get the 10 armor just yet.
But the good news is that he's played Jeskai Trueheart, so he can start taking up a lot.
Oh man, that is gonna hurt. Okay, now we're undoubtedly gonna see the Archmage come out, right? With the maybe Sorcerer Apprentice double spell.
You're still afraid of Brawl, but
okay, you know what? Never mind Mirror Image. What if I just play Arcane Missiles? Leave it at that.
I think you still want to like wait for just a little bit because you want to guarantee like multiple spells, and ideally you can even just get like a scenario where your opponent brawls before you play Antonidas and the Mirror Image. That would be really good.
So you bait the brawl prior to anything.
Yeah,
sure.
that's what I'm.
That's
feeling.
good. That's good. That's definitely good.
And Xixo sees, okay, you know, he's playing a little bit slow. He's holding a lot of these cards. How much further can I press him? He might draw with the Thanos first to see what happens. He might even just... He also could play Arcane Missiles right off the bat, but it is one of his first Fireball gatherers for the Antonidas.
Yeah, I think you might want to be holding on to that. I think like the spell damage that Flamewaker represents makes Blood Mage Thanos a lot more meaningless right now. Oh, hi. That's...
I don't know. I feel like Sorcerer's Apprentice is a little bit redundant. He already has one. Might that just encourage him to try and bait Brawl out if he plays?
I think so. I think this is exactly the type of situation you were alluding to earlier, which is just play 2 or 3 minions and get them brawled out.
Play Mana Worm, play this. He's still not choosing to play the Arcane Missiles, though. That's really interesting to me. Because I mean, he's really trying to save these spells for the Antonitis, but this doesn't feel like super brawl-worthy, in my opinion.
It's still not there, but you've already played 2 executes, 1 shield slam, 1 slam, 1 war axe. Like, what's left? So Xixo's trying to see whether or not the only option left is a brawl, and if that's the case, that's a perfect follow-up before the Archmage double spell with sorcerers.
Not to mention that it's like really clear that Xixo's showing a lot of restraint. Like he plays 3 mana worth of minions and hero powers. It's like you definitely don't want to brawl in that situation either, because you know that your opponent is like trying to bait you into it.
Yeah, he's waiting to refill. Like every single time you kill one thing, he puts 2 down until at some point you brawl, and then you know you're going to be in a world of hurt. So,
if Cifka,
can you play slowly with the Ancient Shield Bearers?
I mean, I feel like Ancient Shield Bearer here is okay. I think the question is if he actually just wants to Cthulhu here.
Alright, so the polymorph from Xixo. If he wants to make the value play, then it's definitely Ancient Shield Bearer with the armor up, and you just wait until Xixo tries to unleash something.
Yeah. I'm kind of fascinated by he chose to kill the Mana Worm, get the value trade, and leave the Flame Waker on, because all Flame Waker has to get is 1 spell like that. Arcane Intellect is pretty nasty. You can play that with the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Chooses not to, just to keep his mana flexible if he picks up Flame Strike.
Oh my god. If Emperor Thorson comes out, he does have it in his deck. This is going to be a Freeze Mage game at the very end.
Yeah,
it's going to feel like a Freeze Mage finish.
Well, yeah. It's gotten some other stuff too, like Yogg-Saron to really add a big punch to it. Yeah. Chooses to hold on to it. It's not going to be brawl-worthy, I feel like. I think if he played a Mirror Image, it would almost solidify it. Be like, yeah, I'm going to brawl. But Xixo also knows that he can have all these spells be 0 with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, so he has essentially 3 Fireball, or 4 with the Frostbolt?
Yeah, with the Frostbolt as well. I think that's a little bit more damage as well. Disciple of Cthulhu, though, one of the good cards for Cifka. There was another War Axe that would have also helped tremendously, a Slam. So even Ghoul, honestly, with Revenge.
I gotta admit that this is pretty next level mage play from Xixo. If it ends up working out, I mean, right now it all could be all for naught. Like Warrior can just be super far ahead, but he's the one who has like the onus to actually kill his opponent.
Yeah, and you saw it too very early in the game. As soon as the War Axe came up on the Mana Worm #1, and the Beckoner of Evil followed up, you saw him switch gears immediately. Stop playing minions, just hold on and try to gather the spells for the Archmage. And this is exactly the spot he wants to be in, waiting for the Emperor Thorson.
Yeah. Precisely. If he can stall that long, I mean, if Emperor's the 30th card in his deck, it's gonna be
yeah, just an auctioneer scenario.
Okay. Yeah, Arcane Blast not exactly guaranteed to pick up a Fireball, as Jab realized last game.
Yeah,
sometimes you just have Antonitis and Arcane Blast and nothing comes of it. Interesting. Another Disciple of Cthulhu.
This is where Bran would be pretty good, where you can just use Bran with a Disciple to clean up. This is your Drake. There's also the Ravaging Ghoul left, so if you revenge into Ravaging Ghoul, then suddenly you clean up a good portion of the board, assuming you want to do it early.
Okay, Cifka just taking it a little bit slower, and that's fine for now.
He's at 52 health, so he's not too far.
Scared, because Xixo has so many cards, you know? It's like, what world do we live in where, like, the Wage is just assembling a full hand and Control Warrior is kind of running low and just kind of helpless here? It's usually the other way around.
Yeah, I think the Mage hand is bugged for Xixo, so I think the Mage's perspective on the spectator mode is glitched.
Yeah, we'll probably have to update it in just a second here. I think another thing to just be aware of is like yogging on a full hand is really risky for the opportunity to draw like too many cards. Anywhere from Sprint to Doom to Arcane to like Lay on Hands. Like just there's so many ways you can draw.
It was a Flame Strike draw. Alright, so we ended up not seeing what it was, but it turned out to be the Flame Strike. And suddenly the Ravaging Ghoul would have been really good on the back of that Revenge if he'd gone for it last turn, but he's still in a good spot.
Yeah.
An okay spot.
It's not the worst. I wonder if he just Cthulhu here. I mean, it's like, how long are you going to wait to put pressure onto your opponent here? Like, you have to eventually win the game, too.
I think he knows there's a Polymorph in Xixo's list, right?
I just don't want the Drake to be chipping away at my health for a few turns here, because he's holding so many cards that surely he can deal with one Ancient Shield Bearer, and he constantly keeps doing it. I guess maybe he feels like he has enough time.
kind of like last game, except now, like he will anticipate the Archmage coming out, and if that's the case, then maybe getting the extra armor matters. But when I look at the Drake, that effectively negates the advantage you're trying to get. So maybe you're trying to bait spells away from your face.
I mean, essentially what Drake does, it just means your tank up is useless.
Right.
Because it just keeps hitting forward and you keep healing forward. Xixo, in the meantime, is still unable to bait out a brawl.
Yeah, not that in this case, StanCifka exactly has the best outcome. You have to go for the Archmage play at some point. This is a pretty okay spot with the Apprentice.
So you can just cast all these spells, get you 4 fireballs. 4 fireballs is a lot, man. It's 24 damage or more, depending on if you have spell power.
And each of them translating to an extra Pyroblast from Xixo.
Okay, and that will definitely provoke a brawl from StanCifka. In the worst case scenario, too, Antonidas can survive the brawl.
Oh, man.
It is a 1 in 8, so 12.5% chance.
Actually, double ghoul will simply just, you just double ghoul slam and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Wow, the draw.
Would you kill a mirror image? I actually asked as a fire bat too. Would you kill off a mirror image and the chance that you pick up a better chance for the shield bearer to survive? Maybe not.
Interesting.
It's hard. It's difficult because you still want one of those 0-2 to survive. The Revenge and the Ravaging Ghoul guarantees him a snipe onto the Antonidas here. I like using Revenge. It's just a lot less useful overall than just Ravaging Ghoul because it is a minion that also damages itself when you play it.
Sure.
And Xixo has a ton of damage. He's got...
Well, I mean, that's just a lot. Xixo.
Here we go.
Astral Communion right off the bat. Let's do it.
Draw a card. Sure.
Why not? Excavate Evil.
Clear the board. Sure.
No. Yeah, not so good.
No, not on Yogg. Wow.
Holy fire.
Wow.
Pretty good. Divine Strength is cute.
Keeps going. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Draw another card.
Draw 2 cards. Deal 9 damage. Pretty
good. Good enough.
It's
not the best, but it's... I might have waited after all my fireballs were played.
I don't know. Now he has the polymorph. Now he has 30 damage.
Yeah.
And his opponent's at 46. It's still doable. His hand's just literally all damage.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have Kabbalist Tome, so again,
But it's dicey, man.
Yeah, I really wonder if maybe waiting for the Yogg greed might have been a little bit more of a payoff. Or is it less likely that it does work when you wait longer?
Hold on. I mean, this Flamewaker can't actually get directly answered.
Not yet, that's for sure. I mean, he's going to have to commit a little bit more to the board if he wants to brawl and have a higher chance, but that's over a few turns.
And each fireball dealing 8 damage. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's 40
and
damage.
Also, no more. There's no more executes for StanCifka, so the ghoul is really only fetching a shield slam, possibly, if it ever draws anything. Yeah, it's kind of clunky.
Xixo has... Okay, so if he deals 13 damage this turn, 30 damage next turn...
Oh, wow, another bit of spell damage right there.
I mean, that's just adding icing on the cake here.
Can you ever get the warrior to overdraw? Like, how many cards left in the warrior's deck? Because I didn't really look.
I wouldn't want to do that. That gives him the ability to get more health points and stuff if that situation arises. Well, okay. Well, he's sniping. But that Excavated Evil, though.
Is insane
with
the ghoul.
That was ridiculous.
That is nuts.
Xixo came back to bite him.
The other shield slam for StanCifka does end up coming out, but won't be necessary just now.
I mean, to be fair, there's not many cards left in the deck, so when you shuffle a card into your opponent's deck, likely it is that he'll draw it.
Sure.
But, he was looking for something else, which is hilarious because now he draws his own Excavated Evil.
And it's cheap pinging.
And he pings. He's probably going to toss a Fireball.
Yeah, I think there's a Water Elemental left, unless I'm mistaken, which means there's very little as far as the winning potential there. And StanCifka is probably just going to lock the game out with the tank up.
Very valiant game, but there's just nothing that's stuck, and that's something that Warrior just knows. Like, despite all this, despite the fact that Antonidas got 4 fireballs, that he was able to have Flamewaker stick on the board collectively across both of them for like 6-7 turns. Warriors still in the game at 3 Ls. It was
Yeah,
like just super hard.
But it's kind of interesting because I saw Sifka basically spend the entire game armoring up. You know, there was a lot of turns where he had the option of weaving in a little bit more removal, and he just chose to hit the tank up. And, you know, that translated over to, say, 12 to 16 extra health, and that's maybe more than he needed, or exactly what he needed.
I gotta say though that Xixo played that game very well.
Yeah,
all
from the
things
beginning.
considering. Like, sure he didn't win, and it wasn't even really close. Like in the end, like you really think
He was like 30 damage away from winning with tank up taken into consideration.
I mean, if he threw all 30 burn over the course of 3 turns, he'd get like in the
Close
teens,
enough, yeah.
the teens. But like it's not really that close.
Yeah.
But you do have to play for those small percentages, and one time it's gonna work out.
Like, I have to wonder, though, like, the whole Yoxeron scenario where he played it exactly before fatigue would become an issue with card draw.
Right.
Like, the odds of drawing cards with Yoxeron is so high that you're likely to kill yourself long before you kill the opponent with it. Like, what's the cutoff when you've got, like, 5 fireballs on top of that?
On that, like, the average draw is like essentially like 2. So if you expect maybe 1 or 2 draw cards, then
out of 20 spells?
Yeah. No, if you play like 10 spells or something like
okay, so off of like 20 to 30 spells, you would have probably drawn like 8 cards total.
Like maybe like 4
to 6, let's say.
4 or 6, somewhere in between then. Like on average, I think. So that would have been like a comfortable-ish medium because he still had full health. So
right,
like, he
at
could
that
probably draw,
Yeah, it wasn't interesting either way. Like, I really wanted to know where that was going to go. So he ends up having a chance, Sifka that is, to maybe sweep as a reverse. But it's going to be a long and uphill battle to get there.
Yeah, let's go to Rogue versus Mage here. Now, Rogue has a lot more defensive tools.
This one especially.
Primarily looking at the fact that Sifka only has 1 sab. That's a really interesting thing. When I think of Rogue, I think of 2 cards I want to play. I want to play Preparation, and I want to play sap. Those are the 2 things that make Rogue for me. And cutting sap has always been something that a lot of Rogue's experts do extremely carefully because it's one of your most powerful tools to gain tempo, and you accelerate through tempo, like preparation and backstab, in order to win the game. So you have to be damn sure if you're going to cut sap from your deck, in my opinion.
He's really trying to beat Zulus, right? That's kind of what his deck looks like it's aiming, at least aiming at.
Sure, if you ban Shaman too. Especially.
Exactly. So the whole idea behind the double Farseer is that you end up surviving more against those small decks, which is important when it comes to beating Tempo Mage when they play on curve with, say, Mana Worm and the Flame Wakers. But if they play off curve, then you need to be able to get on the board very aggressively, because otherwise you're never capitalizing on those minions you're putting in. And the Edwin Van Cleef, would be a little bit better if there were a 2-2 or a 3-2 to kill with this backstab in this spot, though.
Yeah, that'd almost be
the dream.
Yeah, like I'd almost be certain that you would do that. Like there's still a debate that he would coin SI, but I think he would almost guarantee go for that Van Cleef if that Cult Sorcerer was played. As such, he just probably is going to Hero Power pass, let 6-0 present something he needs to, and I think Rogue is completely fine passing. Like, don't play the coin if you don't need to. Don't extend onto the board too far.
Oh, wow.
Okay, prep means that Vibe Teacher gets really strong, so I guess you can just play 1 SI here on the board.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, the thing with the Xixo's deck is there's a polymorph, so suddenly going all in on Edwin is less appealing than maybe in other cases, but even then it's still a very good play. However, the ability to play Vibe Teacher in a spot like this, man, look at that. This is this is insane for Sifka.
Good. So now you can
do everything.
Do you want to go all in? Do you want to Teacher, Prep, Shadow Strike, attack with the dagger,
what about
coin Cold Blood, and just go all?
What about Prep, Shadow Strike, attack with dagger, and then
Van Cleef?
Yeah, just go for crazy Van Cleef.
Well, like you said, you know that polymorph exists. The reason why I like the Vibe Teacher is because it spreads out the threats. You create a ton of 1/1s.
Yeah. It's not an all-in. It really isn't. Not as much, at least.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's hard to say, but like the odds say there's 1 polymorph to my 1 Van Cleef.
This looks like a Van Cleef play to me.
I think so too. It definitely is lining up that way. And he also keeps the coin, and he keeps the Vibe Teacher in the back of this. So even if this gets cleaned up, he still has either a 7-3 or an 8-8. Pick whichever one you want to beat down. The other one is going to stay alive. So you polymorph this, unless your Arcane Missiles are godlike, this is sticking.
Sure. That's also something that's really difficult. 2 Frost Bolts would have to also be the way to stall all damage.
True. Yeah, Arcane Missiles is going to be trying to do a little bit of work, but
Ooh.
not quite there. I wonder if Xixo is just going to do the Xixo play of Escape Concede. He just does that.
Yeah, you play both these. Unfortunately, it's perfect. It's a backstab.
So he's not
Oh
dead yet. This
my
is insane.
God. All right, GG.
Good game. I think we're done here.
You tried, dude. I mean, whatever. Like, sometimes Rogue starts like this, and you can't do anything about it.
I mean, the thing is, like, the Edwin looked great, and then no minions came out for Xixo, so Edwin looked bad, and then Prep came out, and suddenly, disaster. I mean, a 7-3 and an 8-8 is really hard to say no to when you're playing Rogue.
Yeah, I'm like looking to see if there's anything that Cifka could justify playing Teacher instead, but I don't think so. You just go for the easy kill, go for the guaranteed 15 damage, and you just conceal, and Xixo should concede. There you go. So game number 5 in the books here, and I think it was a really good job there by StanCifka to identify like when he could get aggressive there.
Yeah, the all-in was like it was gonna get punished by Polymorph, but at the very least you keep a 3 health minion on board, which doesn't get you'd have to literally get Sorcerer's Apprentice into Poly, into Arcane Blast missiles or something ridiculous.
You don't keep Polymorph in your opening hand. You didn't have a board presence, and even if he had like Frostbolt, like he'd still be in like an awkward spot. So I did like it overall. I didn't mind that or the Teacher. Teacher put out I think 6 damage on board, but it's spread out over the 1/1s, and it's a little bit weaker, I guess, to Flame Waker. So
I think like the Frostbolt tell as well is when he played Arcane Intellect over Frostbolting. If that had been there, then I imagine the 3/3 SI would have died on curve.
Makes sense.
Big tell there when that didn't happen.
Yep. So that's going to make the series 3-2, so not nearly as bad for our Czech player as it was just an hour and a half ago before that Warrior began.
An hour and a half.
Yeah.
Has it been that long?
Now he's got his Druid, and he has, is that the Shaman remaining?
Yeah, the Shaman's still up, I think. Xixo was hoping to beat that up a little bit later.
Mage versus Shaman. Dude, I don't know, man. I'm always so scared whenever Shaman starts off with Tunnel Trog. It's such a weird, it's such a volatile matchup. I feel like Tempo Mage can do the exact same thing that Shaman does.
At random. The thing is, you have no idea how consistent it's going to do it.
It's all about how explosive that start can be. Tunnel Trog and Manworm have a lot in common. That they single-handedly can snowball games to just win.
Yeah, the only issue I find is that the usually the Shaman with Rockbiter and Bolt has more likely, a more likely answer to your Mana Worm than you do for theirs. So you end up having a Frostbolt or Arcane Blast or start rolling dice on the back of missiles.
Yeah, it could be tricky. Let's go into game number 6 here. Cifka starting off with that Wild Growth and Innervate, really powerful cards to fight back against the early flood from Xixo.
Yeah, it's going to need to find a follow-up, though, because as good as they are, like the 4-2 Cthulhu's Chosen isn't exactly at its best in the matchup because of the ability of Flame Waker missiles to just do a lot of work against the Divine Shield. So, I mean, I like this 4-10 or this 4-5 right now. Really hard to answer from a Mage's perspective. The issue with StanCifka's plays right now are, like, how does he want to approach the Wild Growth thing? Like, do you coin Wrath and set up Wild Growth on 2? Or do you try to just innervate a 4-drop right away?
I think I want to innervate a 4-drop, and I think I want it to be Klaxi Amber Weaver.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind Cthulhu's Chosen, because if I pick up, say, Beckoner or Disciple, I might be able to get a 4-10 instead.
You could argue that, but I feel like I'm playing Wild Growth or Wrath next turn anyways. But actually, that might be the case to play Disciple of Cthulhu. Yeah, you're probably right then.
It's one or the other, honestly, but I mean, this is one of the best openers either way. Just getting a 4-drop against a Mana Worm. Like, what kills you? Missiles, Arcane Blast.
Arcane Missiles, or like Arcane Blast. But I guess either way, putting out a 4-mana minion is, whatever the Cthulhu's Chosen or Klaxi Amber Weaver is okay. Both function a little bit similarly.
I mean, maybe even there's a better argument for the 4-2, given that Frostbolt doesn't punish it as much, right? Whereas the 4-5 could be stalled a little bit longer. Yeah, I think they kind of average out to being the same in the end.
Yeah, and this Wild Growth, on the back of this innervate play is pretty huge. Xixo not happy to see that at all. It's
Never.
like just innervate and the wild growth.
Are you serious? All right, well, the Flamewaker does come in for the possible turn 4 with the mirror image. Water Elemental more likely to stick given the fact that Druid just has so much trouble removing those high health minions.
I guess another question maybe in the back of Sifka's mind is, would I rather have a 4/5 or a 4/2 Divine Shield on turn 4?
Yeah.
Because you know that the first minion is not going to survive, so all about which is like more, like which is more reliable. And I guess the Amber Weaver.
I mean, if it's a 4/10, it's more likely. Otherwise, Fireball punishes it more often, right? So
Yeah, but Fireball takes the entire turn.
Right.
I guess if you played the 4/2 Divine Shield, you have Ping plus Arcane Blast. It's close. I think the Claxy Amber Weaver has more upside, though, in case you do drop Disciple of Cthulhu or Beckoner of Evil.
Yeah, I guess the 4/2 Divine Shield also with missiles plus Flamewaker. You know, there's like 5 missiles going out. Higher chance of it working out for them.
All right, StanCifka doesn't really have much to do fill out his curve here. I agree. Don't play the Living Roots. Just save it for cards like Cult Sorcerer or Sorcerer's Apprentice when it comes out. It's a chilly day, though, in Cifka land.
Yeah.
Everything's frozen for the next turn.
Yeah, I think Xixo's hand is actually, like, as clunky as it seemed with the opener that Cifka had, suddenly, unless something like a Dark Arakoa comes out or another Cthulhu buffer to make this 4/10 even happen, this could be a very dry streak of turns for StanCifka.
It is relatively safe to develop onto the board because Cifka is frozen.
Sure.
So it's like I wouldn't hate Flamewaker and
A
even
ping,
just
yeah.
well, I was thinking Flamewaker and Downose, but this also works because Downose can't get hero power.
Absolutely,
You know?
so it'll have to be a swipe. And Dark Arakoa does come out for Cifka. I mean, you want to swipe this off, right?
The Flamewaker's so threatening, you can't leave it up.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson. I mean, you also get to play it on turn 7 with Dark Arakoa plus Living Roots at the same time. So it's still not half as bad, even if you played a turn later, because you can always fill up that mana curve a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, Cifka weighing the possibilities. Like, well, he didn't play a spell with the Flamewaker.
Yeah.
I don't know, though. I want to swipe it.
Yeah, I think if you play Arakoa, Fireball suddenly just wrecks your board and you're back to square one, except even farther behind. I mean, you're still forcing 2 mana out of your opponent here, right?
Yep.
If they don't have a second
Certainly.
Flamewaker or Arcane Missiles.
It's so interesting that Xixo leverages his hero power so much as this tempo mage, which I'm ready to call it something else by now. I don't think it
Yeah,
really
it's
is,
not tempo
you know.
mage at this stage. I think it's a really... oh, man, this is going to be a 4/15?
Yeah, huge swing.
Goodness.
Well, assuming that he doesn't pick up something better, but 4/15 minion is really problematic for Xixo to deal with. That might just single-handedly win the game.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, there is the possibility of removing this,
Yep.
but it means you're forsaking the 6-drop. So do you even do it?
Wait for that Emperor Cobra to come out. Emperor Cobra just challenging literally every minion that comes out.
That would be...
Yeah, I think you mirror image here. Most likely he can't chew through both of them, and then you can use the spell power from the Downose next turn. Woo, lad. Let's just get ready for this amazing Galaxy Amber Weaver.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
you
that
just
is
build the
sick.
biggest possible Amber Weaver.
That is too sick.
Mark of the Wild, ladies and gents. Where is it?
Goodness.
Yeah.
Just remember the days of like just having a 4/9 Twilight Drake was problematic enough. 4/15.
And casually, you know, just something that happens. That's a pretty good card. You want to kill the brand, and you don't want to necessarily commit too
Wow.
much to it. That's insane, actually. That
Yeah,
is,
that was an amazing draw. Yeah,
yeah.
you can do that. I think Arcane Blast, and then allows him to start pushing for damage. I love that. That was amazing draw here for Xixo, and now
The
StanCifka.
0-2 in the way. Oh, that's a pretty good draw there for Cifka
Okay.
as well. Gets to maybe find himself a swipe.
Yeah, it's close. He needs a way to not die because there's 10 damage.
That's one of those ways. That is one of those ways.
Yeah, that's a good draw. So now you can Living Roots past the 0-2 and then kill the 4/3.
And the
Hero-
1-1 with hero
Yeah,
power.
hero power. You're going to drop the ability to play the Beckoners of Evil.
I mean, I guess it depends on how afraid you are of Firebolt and Frostbolt coming out, right? Because the spell damage...
You could play one Beacon of Evil, just leave the Thanos alive.
Sure.
And then buff up the Cthulhu even more.
And just set up the bigger Cthulhu.
I like it.
I don't mind it. I think it's all right. I'm just afraid of burn, but I'm just easily scared.
5, 6, 18, or 14, 15 damage. He's 3 points off.
And there's no healing unless Feral Rage comes out.
Right, and I don't think that's
Really.
in Cifka's list.
He might be running a 1-of. I think it's right.
No,
In
it's
Cthulhu
not.
deck, I don't think it's that common. It's mostly Yogg.
That Mark of the Wild, though, like you mentioned. That could have been nutty.
Yeah.
Xixo, if he just goes all in here. I mean, he also could play this. He could also do double Frostbolt to the face, trade in Thanos, and then
Fireball
go
for the win.
Firebolt. I mean, if he's a literal god, tasteless. Oh my god. Is he doing this? He's doing it. So I feel like the Hearthstone god should reward him for that kind of ballsy play. Oh, okay.
Oh, he's probably going to be finding it next
I
turn.
mean,
but it's not that far off. I think you just push it.
yeah.
You just push it.
That damage ain't going anywhere else but the face.
Yep. And all of a sudden, StanCifka's got no way to self-heal.
Yeah.
Raven Idol would have to be it.
He has to Cthulhu clear here.
I think so, too. I mean, there's a Wrath possibility, but it's just as effective.
Oh.
Doesn't make any difference.
I wouldn't feel good at all with maybe Twin Emperor's okay. That's reasonable.
Sure. We can try that.
But Cthulhu,
Yeah.
the good thing about Cthulhu is that it's an actual clock.
Yeah.
Like, you can counter push on your opponent and actually win the game.
I mean, nothing kills you now that would kill you if you armored up,
Yeah.
right? Or if you found like a little bit of some kind, like some armor gain. So it would have to be something miraculous.
There's no way you can get out of fireball range either.
Yeah.
Xixo has Arcane Intellect. It just feels like it's his destiny to win.
So what if StanCifka tries to get out of the fireball range over 3 turns? You'd have to armor up every single one of these
Right.
turns and
Well,
dodge fireball that much often.
He can't because the mage will just keep hero powering him down.
Right, at every
So-
single point.
Okay, well, he gets to clear. No minion survives.
Yeah.
No. Might as well just play the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right?
Because if you need to play another spell with it, then suddenly it discounts itself.
Right. Looking for any damage.
Come on, we could do
Just
this.
anywhere.
There's 2 fireballs left, man. Oh my god. We have to count on the Archmage and Tinnitus to do it.
Yeah, Archmage is a fireball over 2 turns.
So pinging the minion here means that the armor gain might actually matter. If Cifka tries to
this
get
is
it.
hilarious. Okay, so Xixo doesn't want to play the mirror image because the fact that he loses a spell with Antonius, but if he does, he protects the 3-2 because the Cthulhu gets stopped.
Yeah, exactly.
by
And he protects the
0-2.
face as well, the clock.
And
that
so if he thinks that if he can attack with Sorcerer's Apprentice, he gets Frostbolt. Oh, no, Frostbolt.
Fall's been played, yeah. It's really
So I
down
guess
to Arcane Missiles or...
Arcane Missiles becomes an out.
Yeah, so he's got like any spell
Oh,
that's cheap
hilarious.
enough.
I don't think he's playing Torch, right?
So he could always go for a 1-cost spell like Arcane Blast on the Archmage and get a Fireball for 3 mana, and that would work too.
Yeah, he's not playing
Torches, not in
I
that
don't. I
list.
personally don't like that version. I know Hot Form got #1 on it, and it worked out for him at that time. But I think the meta has evolved past it because I think it's 2 all in on your win conditions.
You mean with the torches?
Yeah, torches and fireballs and frostbolts.
I don't mind it. So here, StanCifka is again not going to play around
Okay.
Fireball.
Yep.
And looks like if Xixo picks up a 1-cost spell, he gets the win. Picks up a Fireball, gets the win.
No.
And it's a Water Elemental. Oh my god. Now he regrets not creating those
Well,
mirror images after the Archmage, but it might have
He
still
was-
been the winning play.
He was dead either way. Like if he if he took the 14, or was it what? Yeah, 14,
14
or 13 damage to phase.
twice, yeah.
He'd be at 9 health. Then he plays mirror image. Minions are on the board. He hits again, so
Yeah.
he's dead. So I mean,
The play was right. The play was
play
right.
was correct.
Is that lethal? I think that's
is
it.
Lethal. I mean, it's lethal on board. so.
Right.
Series is tied, man, and the
What?
Fire Bat prophecy is coming true.
What
More
is-
specifically, more specifically, the fact that Fire Bat has predicted StanCifka to go farther in the tournament. Than
Sure,
6-0.
farther, and also saying that the Tempo Mage was the worst deck in Xixo's lineup. Like, so everything's kind of Firebat I mean, I almost
Guy's
want
pretty good
him
at
to be
Hearthstone.
wrong. I almost want him to be wrong.
I want to be right.
Okay.
Because
sure. Create a narrative.
It'd be awesome to see if he could kind of foresee that. You know?
Yeah, it was a good. I mean, he really doesn't believe in this deck from Xixo. He literally said it repeatedly. This deck is dysfunctional, but I've seen it, and decks like it work pretty well in the past. So it's a pretty hard statement to make. It's very rigid.
What Firebat said was he practiced with Xixo. He played 3 best of 7s with him, and every single best of 7 where Tempo Mage came up, the deck went 0-3 for him, and he would beat Xixo's Tempo Mage and then sweep his Tempo Mage from that point on. And so the only games that Tempo Mage won in the entire series was against another Tempo Mage.
Right, in the mirror match, always, and it always wins.
And so I think he feels like Tempo Mage is a weak link in the entire lineup. And now Xixo has lost 3 games with it. He has to play another one. And it's so frustrating because you're just the momentum's lost. You were up so convincingly 3-0.
It's kind of like that first series we had actually with Xixo on the first match of the day, right? Came so close to just closing out everything, and then there was a chance.
And Xixo was also saying in his pre-game interviews about how he loves best of 7s because you were up, because you can go up 3-0, and then
reverse.
You can still reverse sweep. And
well, it's about how I don't know.
It's great, dude. It's juicy. That's the kind of drama we want in Hearthstone.
I'm kind of liking the fact that we're seeing that extra deck, and I think that's kind of the interesting thing about the best of 7s. And StanCifka was talking about that earlier. Is it doesn't really matter the 3 main decks that you play. StanCifka said it's all about that 4th deck that gets played. So he likes that 4th deck mind game where he brought Rogue, for instance, and other players chose other decks.
Okay, well. Shaman starting off with turns 1, 2, 3, pretty much
locked out. Yeah,
locked down. I mean, Feral Spirits is not able to be played.
Good arcane missiles there for Xixo, dodging a potential.
But
snowball.
if Argent Squire survived, then Flame Tongue Totem with this board would have been nuts.
Yeah, and Xixo does pick up. I mean, there's the pink play sets up a better water elemental if you're going to coin it out. But you can also just go like Sorcerer coin for Osbolt on 4, or on 3 that is. But that also makes your curve really awkward against Feral Spirit. So if you go for Mirror Image now, then you can go and play around Feral Spirit a bit more. But it's always kind of tricky.
Yeah, I agree with this. I think going for board preservation is the most important thing. Cult Sorcerer being able to attack, and more importantly, kill like totems and other small annoying things.
Yeah.
More important. And StanCifka here doesn't have a really good play.
There really isn't much in the deck that could make this good anyway, right?
That's something that people don't highlight enough about Totem Golem is how disruptive it is early game to everything else you want to do in your deck. On turn 3, you have so many great stuff from Feral Spirits to the Tuskar Totemic, and you're just unable to play so many of these things because of Totem Golem.
Yeah, I think Totem Golem is actually at its best on the coin on turn 1. Like, that's usually where it's doing its best. Even before Tunnel Trog, that is, right? Because that way at least you're freeing up turn 3 systematically.
And Xixo was rewarded. Look at that. He picks the Mana Worm. Perfect mana in that situation. And StanCifka now stuck in a situation where even if he played this 4-mana 7/7, he can't get through that 0/2 taunt because he doesn't have enough mana to play Doomhammer.
Yeah.
So he's almost accepting the fact that his opponent will double dip in damage with what's on board. So that's at least accepting 10 damage or maybe even more.
Is there ever
maybe even worse.
Yeah.
Like if he plays the 4-mana 7/7 and then Fireball comes out, and all of a sudden Shaman's the one taking the damage from Tempo Mage.
So what if you play Feral Spirit to set up Tuskar Totemic on 5? It's a little bit awkward right now, but it makes the Tuskar on 5 a bit better, as opposed to going Flame-Wreathed Faceless into Tuskar.
I think you might even play Tuskar right now, so you can play Doomhammer next turn and clean up the board.
Sure, why not? That way the 3/2 and the 0/2 are gone. If you pick up a good totem like Mana Tide,
that's a good one.
You're going to get even more flexible options down the line. Well,
that was amazing.
That was a pretty good totem.
Oh, man. All right, well, Xixo still has Water Elemental now. That is the natural predator of the Doomhammer. What are you going to do about that, StanCifka?
Well, he's still going to have to use the Doomhammer to clean up all these little minions.
Well, I think the plan changes now.
Yeah.
Doomhammer just means that you basically take 2 overload and you kill 2 things on board here. He's got 5 mana though. What can you do?
Feral Spirit with Flame Tongue in the middle would not really change anything to the value of the wolf, so that's unlikely to do very much.
What it does do though is make Water Elemental take a lot of damage.
And then it's more vulnerable to either a Doomhammer hit later down the line or just like leftover ping. I think that's still okay, because if the wolves end up damaging the Water Ellie a bit, the Lava Burst still finishes the job. But yeah, I mean, the Azure Dracon curve is absolutely stellar here. This is insane. The hand from Xixo, if he picks up Firebolt and Frostbolt going forward, is going to be, oh my god.
The Faceless Summoner as
the
well.
dream.
Another reason why I don't like Doomhammer this turn was that you're overloaded for 2, so like your hand gets increasingly more awkward.
Yeah.
So now if you play the 7/7, it's like, so what? You're back in the same exact position. You're taking a lot of damage, and you're getting frozen. It just felt like the Doomhammer was the mana-efficient play, but you set yourself up for failure if your opponent has any minion to play.
Yeah, the wolves damaged the Water Elemental enough that somehow you could get away with clearing it later. Whereas now, you still have to use those wolves at some point.
Okay. So I think we just play the 7/7.
I mean, we've committed to this line of play, right?
Cross his finger that it doesn't have Fireball, which I'm feeling a Fireball. Okay, it doesn't come out yet.
Well, a 6 mana 5/5 with a 3-drop attached to it. Either you're digging for Fireballs now with double Arcane in and still Freezing Face, which is okay, or you're just committing even more to the board, knowing there's absolutely no chance of AoE. Wow! Fierce Monkey coming out. That is nuts.
That's amazing. Now he has to commit removing it with a spell.
And suddenly you can't even. I mean, you would needed something like spell damage to Lightning Bolt to get away from this one.
Right. If it was just like a normal 3/3 minion like my control tech, you could be able to just ignore it in a way, use his removal, and start fighting back onto the board. But Cifka's again locked in a position where he has to choose one or the other. He can't Lava Burst and Feral Spirits. And I just feel like while that Doomhammer play was good to kill off some of these smaller minions, the bigger picture is like Xixo had minions.
Yeah, he has something already, so you're still not getting away from. If you cleared up the board completely while you were slightly ahead, then sure. But if you're using that kind of removal against the Water Elemental, then suddenly the Doomhammer loses all value for the entire game.
It's not over yet. Cifka can Lava Burst 3/4. I think it's a priority to.
Did you kill the Drake? Or?
I think you have to kill the 5/5 to take the less damage, and just play like.
I mean, you might play the Wolves plus the Flame Juggler or the Flame Tongue in between, right? Because you're weakening a bit of everything. Flame Juggler has a chance to ping off the 5/5. If that gets smashed into it, Flame Strike would be an auto win, but.
Yeah, that's like you can't really play as if Flame Strike exists here.
I mean, you could just extra spell damage, arcane missiles, and see where the dice go. How the dice roll.
Yep. Any direct damage here to help remove would be really good.
Oh my
just
god!
Like that.
Well, okay.
Just, 4.
You jinxed it.
9, 12. 12 damage to face.
Guaranteed with a fireball backup on the possibility.
There is a corner case scenario where he can lethal if all 4 arcane missiles hit face. But
you're being facetious.
Of course, I'm not saying that
it's possible.
he has that possibility.
Yeah, it is. It's a funny one. He is gonna play the safe play and still probably end up getting away with the game if no disasters occur. Given the fact that his opponent is still unable to use the Doomhammer for any reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I like just putting your opponent on a 2-turn clock here. Just go all face. And Cifka is just kind of down to his last turn here. I don't really foresee a way for him to get out of it. Shaman's really good at fighting even or ahead, but it's super bad from fighting from behind like this. Not really anything you can do here. Well, and Cifka fought valiantly, man. He climbed all the way back to Game 7, but Shaman fought at the finish line, and that's not the first time Shaman's lost this series. It's multiple times it's lost.
Well, can you actually find a way to do this? Because if you let's say you use Lava Burst, I mean, you can bolt down with spell damage, but I don't think you have the option of doing that if you're going to go for Flame Juggler 50/50, right? To stay alive. Oh my! The 33% hits.
Well, I mean, look, he's staying alive.
But
Look how much health he has,
he
man.
might get pinged to death. I agree. He's at 7.
Yeah. You definitely have to go for it, though.
Yeah, there's really not much else you can do. And just like that, it seems like the Doomhammer investment...
Just go phase.
This is almost worse than just getting Harrison Jones, it feels. It's just like the option is right there in front of you.
It's close, but I think Harrison's a lot worse. He draws a lot of cards, the power's on
Sure.
board. You're never frozen. You're like eternally frozen.
I think the feeling's worse. Losing to
Sure.
Water Elemental feels a lot worse. And still no Fireball for Xixo. Might be a repeat of last game, but I doubt it. The odds are...
Yeah, I don't mind either pinging or playing a 2-drop here. It's perfectly fine. Cifka still looking for ways to survive.
That might be some kind of self-healing.
I almost feel like he's dead on board either way. But let's see. Let's see what comes out.
Spell damage totem.
Spell damage is nice.
All right. That might actually... No, that is not what he wants. Life tap is suicide.
That should do it, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Because he can clear off the Sorcerer's Apprentice, he can clear off the Flame Waker, but he can't kill off the Water Elemental. I think he needed to heal.
Yeah, or armor up at the very least, which also kind of worked. Let's override this damn Doomhammer that did nothing all game and leave this series. And down goes StanCifka with a near sweep. Reverse sweep almost happened at 6-0 here. That was really good series overall. I think...
Well, not looking good for Firebat's bet. I think 6-0 able to advance. Also, Temple Mage got the win. It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile, Noxious, especially in a game like Hearthstone.
I'm pretty happy. Pretty happy to see the Shamans not completely dominating despite a really good early game.
Xixo won't be done yet. He'll be playing the winner of our next series, which is Xixo versus
Jab.
And that should be fun, too, because... Jab looking to redeem himself after that rocky game, Series 1 performance.
Yeah.
But Xixo also trying to hold it down because I think China is really always anxious to prove itself to the West. Really wants to kind of put it out there that it's one of the top regions out there.
You keep mentioning that. I haven't really noticed the amount of pressure that they put on their players, but you tell me that they do.
They do, man. The community is ruthless. You think Twitch chat's bad? Try going to a Chinese forum. They are brutal.
And no one's stopping it from happening. Everybody's like, yeah, it's normal to be, that brutal with your players.
It's true. The last person that won the StarLadder was a Chinese player.
Yep, I remember that.
And
he was still bashed.
Yeah, he was bashed, but when he won, he posted, "I won," and then they got a few comments. But the main thing that people were talking about in the thread was how handsome Dog was. So even when
I like that, you can't even win when you win.
Even when a Chinese player wins, they don't even talk about it. They just talk about how hot Dog is.
Yeah, they just need a shirt off.
Dog is so hot. He's so handsome. Yeah. I'm not joking. I'm not trolling you.
I believe you. I believe you, Frodan.
This is exactly what they were talking about.
100%. I'm not even surprised.
Yeah, not even loved by his own. Well, hopefully that changes
Bible thump.
As time goes on. In the meantime, I think we're going to prep for an interview.
Something like that. I know that we're supposed to have an interview.
Are we ready for the interview? Okay, just a couple of seconds here.
Right. So, it's going to be a repeat of the series we had earlier. Jab versus Cifka.
No.
Whoever ends up winning the first, the next match.
You're just predicting
there's
Jab.
A possibility of Jab taking it over StarSeries. But then again, the lineups, I feel like kind of... the more solid lineup overall for the event would belong to StarSeries overall. Jab is bringing a very standard lineup.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, I think we're ready, so let's hop over and see what they're
StanCifka.
Pretty relieved. I didn't want it to go to Game 7 after I was up 3-0, but in the end it worked out.
So, how were you feeling when it was tied 3-3 and you still had the Tempo Mage left after the Tempo Mage had lost the previous 3 games?
I mean, the last matchup was a pretty decent one. I also had a good matchup against his Rogue, but his Rogue just threw the nuts. But still, I knew I had a good matchup, but after he kept 3 cards in his opening hand, and my opening hand was pretty bad, I was really worried, but I just top-decked my way out.
Terrific. Do you still think Tempo Mage is one of the best decks in the entire tournament?
What's going on? Okay. So I never said that Tempo Mage is one of the best decks. I think that the 4 other classes, Mage, Warrior, Shaman, Druid, not Mage, Shaman, Warlock, Druid, and Warrior are all a lot better, but I still think that Mage is the 5th least bad deck. I think that Hunter, Paladin, Priest, and Rogue are just worse.
就是之前也是问，就是 Xixo 说，赢了之后的感想是什么？然后 Xixo 是说如释重负，然后之后继续问，就是关于之前的比赛，是一开始因为是3比0先领先，然后后来被追到3比3平，是有什么感想？那 Xixo 也是说，是确实是感到了一些紧张，因为一开始法师打战士的话不是一个优势对局，然后打盗贼的话，应该是一个5-5开的局面，但是因为上来的话也是盗贼连续的。盗贼连续的几次神抽，然后都抽到了所有需要的卡组，所以是直接溃败。然后最后一把是打萨满，一开始的话我是自己这边换了3张牌，但是我看到Stan 他是留了4张卡里保留了3张，所以我一开始是非常紧张。但是最后我是发现，我是慢慢的就是通过自己的右手第1张，然后也是神抽抽到了胜利，然后再是谈到了就是之后的这些。职业上的平衡也是 Xixo 说，确实他认为法师还是比较就是法师还是征服4里面新加的一个职业里面剩下的5个职业里稍微比较弱的一个职业。
All right, so now that you've defeated StanCifka, who are you most afraid of at playing and throughout the rest of the tournament?
I'm not afraid of anyone. Like I'd like to play other opponents just to show that their lineups are weak as well, but if I have to play the same opponents again, that's fine as well.
也是问到了说，现在你成功的晋级了下一轮，那么之后你想面对哪一个对手？然后 Xixo 也是非常自信说，我任何一个对手我都是不惧怕的，然后我会观察他们的卡组，然后如果有机会的话，我希望能跟同一个对手再打一次。
All right, well, that's all the questions I got for you. Congrats on making it through. We're going to throw it back to the casters and figure out what's going on for the rest of the tournament today.
All right, well, Noxious is dead. We're going to bury him out back. We'll
Oh
sing a
god, that was the
soliloquy
best.
in honor
That
of
was the
him.
best.
All right.
All right.
Well, yeah, Firebit,
Likes his interviews.
we'll work on it, man. He's got the analyst part down of Hearthstone. We can work on all the
Yeah, no, he's definitely. I think he was just getting taken off guard by how long it took, because he spoke for a long time before he translated. Got to
I'm
get
telling you,
the.
man,
to the
Hearthstone players
translator.
don't know what to do with their hands, man.
Yeah, he's just like, what's
I
going
talk
on?
about this in my stream. Like, the best way you can improve production value across the board, bar none, is just give people something to hold so they know what to do with their hands. Figuring these guys don't know what to do. Put it on their crotch, put it on their leg, put it on each other's crotch. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do that a lot.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap up this 3rd series and go into our 4th series, the losers match of Group A. We're going to wrap up Group A before the end of the day, so we have 2 more best of 7s. Don't go anywhere. More StarSeries Season 2 finals right after this break.